The security guard's hand was already reaching for Lena's ID badge when the first black Humvee jumped the curb outside Silvergate Medical Center. Then another. Then 6 more. The administrative conference room went silent as boots hit pavement in synchronized thunder. Dr. Marcus Thorne's smug smile faltered. Director Patricia Voss stopped mid-sentence, her finger still pointed accusingly at the young nurse standing alone under the fluorescent glare. Through the second-floor window, they watched uniformed figures pour out. Not paramedics, not police. Military, elite. Moving with the kind of purpose that makes civilians step back without being told. And they were heading straight for the entrance. "What the hell is this?" Voss whispered. Lena Hart didn't move, didn't smile. Just watched the convoy with the same unnervingly calm expression she'd worn through the entire disciplinary hearing, like she'd been expecting something, like she knew something they didn't. Before we go further, if you're watching this from Chicago, Mumbai, Berlin, anywhere in this world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit subscribe, because what happens next will make you question everything you think you know about the people around you. Now let's rewind 12 hours to where this really began. Lena had been scrubbing dried blood from under her nails when the whispers started. The overnight shift had been brutal. A 3-car pileup on the interstate, 2 GSWs from a robbery gone wrong, and a cardiac arrest that she'd helped stabilize while the attending physician barked orders like he was conducting an orchestra instead of saving a life. Her feet ached. Her back screamed. But the water running red in the staff bathroom sink didn't bother her anymore. Some things you just get used to. "Did you hear about Hart?" The voice drifted through the partially open door. Jenny Ruiz, one of the day shift nurses. Lena recognized the tone, that particular frequency of gossip that people use when they want to be overheard but maintain deniability. "The equipment thing?" Another voice, male, probably Derek from radiology. "Yeah, Thorne's furious, says she was messing with the ventilator controls in Bay 3 without authorization. Called it dangerous negligence." Lena dried her hands slowly, methodically, each finger, between the knuckles. The cheap paper towels always fell apart if you rushed. "That doesn't sound like her," Derek said. "Hart barely talks. She just does her job and goes home." "That's what makes it worse," Jenny replied. "The quiet ones are always hiding something." The bathroom door swung open before Lena could decide whether to announce herself. Jenny froze, her expression cycling through surprise, embarrassment, and something harder to name. Maybe disappointment that the subject of gossip had materialized too soon. "Hey, Lena, didn't know you were—" "The ventilator in Bay 3 had a pressure sensor malfunction," Lena said. Her voice came out flat, matter of fact. "The alarm system wasn't triggering properly. I documented it and adjusted the manual override to keep the patient stable until maintenance could log the ticket." Jenny's smile tightened. "I'm sure you did everything right. The patient is still breathing, so yeah." Lena walked past them both, down the corridor that smelled like industrial cleaner in desperation. Silvergate Medical Center had been her workplace for 18 months. A solid, if unremarkable, Level 2 trauma center on the south side of the city, serving everyone from uninsured immigrant families to mid-level executives too impatient to drive to the premium facilities uptown. The ER saw maybe 60 patients on a busy shift. The staff was competent, mostly. The equipment was adequate, barely. And Lena had learned within her first week that asking too many questions or offering too many suggestions was a good way to get labeled difficult. So she'd adapted, kept her head down, fixed what she could fix quietly, ignored what she couldn't. But apparently that hadn't been quiet enough. Dr. Marcus Thorne was waiting near the nurse's station, arms crossed, his white coat somehow still pristine despite the overnight chaos. He was 40-something, with the kind of distinguished gray temples that made patients trust him and the kind of ego that made nurses avoid him. Behind him stood Patricia Voss, the hospital's administrative director, a woman whose entire personality could be summarized as risk mitigation in a blazer. "Ms. Hart," Thorne's voice carried across the station. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. "We need to discuss your unauthorized modification of medical equipment." Lena felt the familiar weight settle into her chest, that specific pressure that came from knowing a fight was already lost before it started. She'd felt it before. Different uniform, different country. Same fundamental truth. When someone with authority decides you're the problem, evidence becomes optional. I documented everything in the system, she said. The sensor was faulty. The patient was at risk. The equipment was functioning within acceptable parameters, Thorne countered. Your adjustment violated protocol and could have compromised patient safety. This isn't the first time you've overstepped. That last part was new. Lena's eyes narrowed slightly. What are you talking about? Voss stepped forward, tablet in hand. We've been reviewing your performance patterns. Multiple instances of equipment modifications, protocol deviations, unauthorized medical judgment calls. I'm a registered nurse. Medical judgment is literally my job, and a concerning pattern of insubordination. Voss's fingers swiped across the screen. Last month, you contradicted Dr. Chen's treatment plan in front of a patient's family. 2 weeks ago, you filed a safety complaint about the medication dispensary that cost us 3 days of operational downtime. Yesterday, you bypassed the charge nurse entirely to admit a patient directly to ICU. The patient was in septic shock. Every minute mattered. And who made you the authority on that decision? Thorne's voice dropped to something colder. You've been here 18 months, Hart, not 18 years. You don't have the experience or the credentials to second-guess attending physicians. Around them, the ER hummed with controlled chaos, phones ringing, monitors beeping, gurneys rolling past. But in the small bubble around the nurse's station, everything had gone still. Lena could feel eyes on her, some sympathetic, most just grateful it wasn't them. Conference room, Voss said. Now, we're addressing this formally. The conference room on the second floor had windows overlooking the main entrance and walls thin enough that privacy was more theoretical than actual. 3 other people were already waiting. Dr. Ellen Croft from Quality Assurance, a hospital lawyer whose name Lena couldn't remember, and Tom Santos, the charge nurse who'd been conspicuously absent during most of Lena's recent shifts. They sat. She stood. This is a formal disciplinary review, Voss began, reading from a prepared statement. Lena Hart, you are being placed on immediate suspension pending investigation into multiple violations of hospital policy, including but not limited to unauthorized equipment modification, insubordination, and reckless deviation from established medical protocols. The words washed over her like white noise. Lena had heard variations of this speech before. Different words, different language. Same script. You didn't follow orders, you made people uncomfortable. You're the problem here. Your badge will be deactivated effective immediately, Voss continued. You'll surrender all hospital property and leave the premises within the hour. Human Resources will contact you regarding the investigation timeline, and you're making a mistake, Lena said. Thorne actually laughed. I don't think you're in a position to... The ventilator issue wasn't isolated. Bay 3 has been on the maintenance backlog for 6 weeks. I filed 3 separate tickets. Nobody responded. That's not your responsibility, Croft interjected. Equipment management has its own chain of command. And when that chain of command ignores critical safety issues, you follow up with your supervisor. You don't take matters into your own hands. Voss's expression hardened. This is exactly the attitude problem we're addressing. You seem to think the rules don't apply to you. I think patient safety is more important than bureaucracy. And I think your employment here is terminated effective immediately. The words landed like a slap. Around the table, expressions ranged from uncomfortable to satisfied. Santos wouldn't meet her eyes. The lawyer made a note on his legal pad. Thorne leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Wait. Lena's voice stayed level. You're not suspending me. You're firing me. We're terminating your employment due to gross misconduct and repeated policy violations, Voss clarified, as if the distinction mattered. Security will escort you out. I suggest you don't make a scene. Through the window, Lena could see the ER entrance below. Ambulances in their designated bays, visitors shuffling through the sliding doors. A typical Thursday morning at a typical hospital. Somewhere down there, patients were waiting, hurting, trusting that the people in this building knew what they were doing. You should check the backup generator logs, Lena said quietly, and the medication dispensary calibration records, and the fire suppression system maintenance dates. Voss's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I kept copies of everything I tried to report, every ignored ticket, every missed inspection, every time someone said we'll get to it later about critical infrastructure. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "Are you threatening us?" Thorne demanded. "I'm telling you that when something goes wrong, not if, when, you're going to wish you'd listened." Lena met his gaze without blinking. "But by all means, fire the person who actually gave a damn." She turned toward the door, made it 3 steps. Then the fire alarm shrieked to life. Not the building alarm, the emergency alert system. Different sound, different meaning. The overhead speakers crackled with static before a recorded voice cut through. "Code Black, mass casualty incident. All available personnel report immediately. This is not a drill. Code Black." The conference room door burst open. A younger nurse Lena vaguely recognized, Maya something, stood in the doorway, her face pale, scrubs already spotted with blood. "We need everyone," she gasped. "Chemical exposure at the North Harbor industrial site. Initial count is 40+ casualties. Ambulances are already en route. We're about to be slammed." Voss was on her feet. "How many?" "They're saying at least 60, maybe more. Some critical, most moderate, all needing decon." Maya's eyes found Lena. "We need every hand. I don't care what's happening up here." "Ms. Hart is no longer employed by this hospital," Voss said flatly. "Security will escort her out through the side exit." Maya stared. "You're joking." "I'm not. She's terminated. She leaves. Now. We're about to have patients dying in the hallways, and you're worried about the decision is final." Voss's voice could have cut glass. "Everyone else, downstairs. Move." The room emptied in seconds. Lena found herself alone with Voss and the security guard who'd materialized in the doorway. A guy named Rodriguez, who'd always been decent, who looked deeply uncomfortable with his current assignment. "Badge," Voss demanded. Lena unclipped it, handed it over. The small piece of plastic with her photo felt heavier than it should. "Rodriguez will take you down the staff exit. Don't stop. Don't talk to anyone. Don't—" The building shook. Not an earthquake. Something else. A deep, resonant boom that rattled the windows and sent dust drifting from the ceiling tiles. Car alarms started wailing outside. The lights flickered. "What the hell?" Voss moved to the window. Then they heard it. Engines. Multiple. Heavy. Getting closer. Lena reached the window first, looked down at the scene unfolding below. 7 military vehicles, Humvees, and what looked like a modified transport truck had formed a perimeter around the ER entrance. Soldiers were deploying with the kind of smooth efficiency that only came from extensive training, carrying equipment that definitely wasn't standard medical gear. No flags, no visible unit markings, just uniform dark colors and the kind of presence that made civilians instinctively back away. A tall figure emerged from the lead vehicle, a woman, maybe 50s, with silver hair pulled back severely and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades making decisions that others had to live with. She scanned the hospital entrance, spoke into a radio, then pointed. More soldiers moved. "Who authorized military response to a chemical spill?" Voss whispered. Lena didn't answer. Couldn't. Because she was watching the way the soldiers moved, the specific equipment they were carrying, the particular pattern of their deployment. She recognized all of it, every single element. This wasn't a response to the chemical spill. This was something else entirely. Rodriguez's radio crackled. His expression went from uncomfortable to confused to something approaching fear as he listened to whatever was being transmitted. "Ma'am," he said to Voss, "command says they're asking for someone by name." "Who?" "They want Lieutenant Hart. They say it's urgent." The blood drained from Voss's face. She turned to Lena, seeing her, really seeing her, for maybe the first time. "What did he just call you?" Lena was already moving toward the door. "I need to get downstairs." "Answer me. Why are they calling you lieutenant?" "Because that's my rank." Lena's voice had changed. Still quiet, but with an edge that made Rodriguez step aside automatically. "And unless you want to interfere with a federal operation, you'll let me do my job." She was halfway down the stairs when the screaming started. The ER had transformed into controlled chaos. Gurneys lined every available space. The chemical exposure patients were arriving in waves, some walking, some carried, all terrified and contaminated. The decontamination tent that had been set up outside was already backlogged. Inside, nurses were scrambling, doctors were shouting conflicting orders, and the carefully practiced mass casualty protocols were falling apart under the weight of reality. Lena hit the main floor and immediately assessed 3 patients in severe respiratory distress, 2 with what looked like second-degree chemical burns, at least a dozen more showing early signs of exposure. The decon procedure was bottlenecked. Triage was overwhelmed. And in the middle of it all, Dr. Thorne was frozen, staring at a monitor that was flashing critical alerts from multiple directions. Then the military entered, not through the front doors, through every entrance simultaneously. Soldiers in specialized hazmat gear moving with purpose, carrying equipment that made the hospital's supplies look like toys. A mobile decon unit rolled in, sophisticated filtration systems already humming. Medical personnel in military uniforms began establishing treatment protocols with the kind of speed that suggested they'd done this dozens of times before. And leading them, striding through the chaos like she owned it, was the silver-haired woman from outside. "Who's the senior physician?" she demanded. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. Thorne stepped forward, trying to reassemble his authority. "I'm Dr. Marcus Thorne, attending physician. What's the meaning of this military—" "Where's Lieutenant Hart?" "I don't know what you're—" "Lena Hart, 5'6", blonde, quiet, works as a nurse here." "Where is she?" "She's not authorized to be in this area," Voss said, appearing from somewhere. "She's been terminated. We're handling this situation. Colonel Sarah Kane, USAMRIID." The woman's ID appeared in her hand. "And you're not handling anything. This is now a federal emergency response to a Class A biological threat. Where is Lieutenant Hart?" Biological. The word rippled through the ER like a shockwave. "We were told chemical exposure," Thorne said weakly. "You were told what you needed to hear to secure the perimeter. The actual situation is classified and considerably worse." Kane's eyes swept the room. "I need Hart. Now. She's the only one here qualified for what's coming." "I'm here." Lena emerged from the stairwell. She'd grabbed scrubs from somewhere, tied her hair back, and her entire demeanor had shifted. The quiet nurse who'd stood silent through her own firing was gone. What walked toward Colonel Kane was someone else entirely, someone comfortable with command, with crisis, with the particular kind of hell that most people only saw in nightmares. Kane's expression softened fractionally. "Lieutenant, good. We've got a situation." I gathered that. Lena was already scanning the room with new eyes, processing information at a different level. "How bad?" "Worst case scenario. The chemical spill was a cover. We've got a biological agent release at the industrial site. Engineered pathogen, highly contagious, symptom onset in 6 to 8 hours. These people are infected. So is everyone they've been in contact with. And we've got maybe 4 hours before this hospital becomes ground zero for an outbreak." The ER went silent. Even the patient seemed to stop moving. Thorne found his voice first. "That's impossible. We would have been notified." "You're being notified now," Kane said flatly. "And we're implementing containment protocols immediately. This hospital is now under quarantine. Nobody in, nobody out, until we've identified and isolated every potential exposure." She turned back to Lena. "I need you running triage. Real triage. Not whatever chaos this is. We need to identify symptomatic patients, separate them from clean cases, and establish treatment protocols before we lose control completely." "Chain of command?" Lena asked. "You're it. These are my medics, but you know this facility. You know these people. Make it work." "Wait," Voss stepped forward, her voice shrill. "You can't just walk in here and—" "Ma'am." One of Kane's soldiers, young, professional, absolutely unmovable, positioned himself between the colonel and the administrator. "Step back. This is my hospital. This is a federal quarantine zone. You can cooperate or be removed. Your choice, quickly." Lena was already moving. "I need the West Wing cleared. All non-critical patients move to secondary care areas. Convert the surgical prep rooms to isolation units. Pull every ventilator we have, working or not, and get them to central supply. We're going to need them." A nurse Lena had worked with before, Carlos, solid guy, never panicked, nodded and started moving. Others followed, grateful that someone was giving clear orders. "Dr. Thorne," Lena continued, her voice carrying across the space, "you're on treatment protocols. Work with the military medical team. They'll have access to therapeutics we don't stock. Dr. Croft, you're coordinating with infection control. I want every potential exposure point mapped within the hour." Thorne opened his mouth, closed it. The woman he'd helped fire 20 minutes ago was now giving him orders, and somehow he was following them. "The ventilator in Bay 3, Kane said quietly, falling into step beside Lena. "That wasn't random troubleshooting, was it?" "No." "You found something. Maintenance logs were off. Equipment that should have been inspected wasn't. I started looking deeper." Lena glanced at the colonel. "How long have you been watching this facility?" 3 weeks. We had intelligence suggesting the target was somewhere in the industrial corridor. When your safety report started flagging systemic problems, we got interested." Kane's expression was grim. "Someone's been sabotaging your equipment. Small things. Subtle. The kind of degradation that wouldn't be noticed until it mattered. And now it matters. Now people are going to die unless we're perfect." Kane paused. "I'm sorry we couldn't read you in sooner. Operational security." "I get it." Lena did. She'd operated in enough black sites to understand how information compartmentalization worked. "What's our realistic containment window?" 4 hours until symptom onset in the first wave. 8 hours until we know if secondary infections occurred. 72 hours until we can declare containment success or failure. Kane's jaw tightened. The agent is engineered to be contagious before symptoms appear. If even one person leaves this building while incubating, she didn't need to finish. Lena understood pandemic protocols, understood what a weaponized pathogen could do in a densely populated city. "Then we don't let anyone leave," Lena said simply. The next 3 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. The military medical teams were good, frighteningly good, but they didn't know the facility, didn't know the staff, didn't know which equipment could be trusted and which couldn't. Lena bridged that gap, moving through the ER like a conductor, coordinating civilian and military medicine into something that almost resembled a functional response. Patients were sorted, isolated, treated. Samples were taken and rushed to mobile labs set up in the parking lot. The ventilator from Bay 3 was pulled apart and analyzed, and sure enough, someone had tampered with the pressure sensors. Subtle sabotage designed to fail during maximum stress. "They wanted the equipment to break during the crisis," Kane said, watching her analysts work. "Maximize casualties. Maximum chaos." "Who's they?" Lena asked. "Still working on that, but whoever planned this knew this hospital's vulnerabilities, knew the maintenance schedules, knew which systems were already stretched thin." Kane paused. "Someone on the inside." The implications settled like lead weight. Lena thought about ignored safety reports, delayed maintenance tickets, the systematic way her concerns had been dismissed. "We need to lock down personnel files," she said. "Anyone with access to maintenance systems, anyone who's been pushing back on safety upgrades, anyone with financial pressure or already on it. My people have been running background since we arrived. But Hart," Kane's voice dropped. "When this is over, there's going to be questions about how this hospital missed so many warning signs, about who ignored what reports." Lena understood. The people who'd just fired her were about to face federal scrutiny for everything she'd been trying to fix. "Good," she said simply. Hour 5. The first patient developed symptoms: fever, difficulty breathing, the specific presentation that matched the classified pathogen profile. Lena was there within seconds, coordinating isolation protocol, ensuring the medical team had what they needed. The patient was terrified. So was everyone around her. "Am I going to die?" the woman asked. She was young, maybe 30, wearing a wedding ring. "Not if I can help it," Lena said, and meant it. Hour 6. 3 more symptomatic. The treatment protocols were working, but barely. Every case was touch and go. The military had brought experimental therapeutics, classified drugs still in trial phases, but they required precise timing, perfect dosing, constant monitoring. Hour 7. Dr. Thorne approached Lena near the isolation ward. He looked like he'd aged a decade. "I need to know," he said quietly. "The equipment issues you reported, the safety concerns, were they real?" "Yes." "Urgent?" "Yes." "Ignored anyway?" "Also, yes." He struggled with the words. "I should have listened." "Yeah, you should have." Lena didn't have time for his guilt. "Right now, I need you focused. We've got 2 patients crashing simultaneously. Can you handle that or not? He nodded, pulled himself together, moved. Whatever else he was, Thorne was a competent physician when he got out of his own way. Hour 8, the critical window. If they'd contained the exposure, if the protocols had worked, if they'd been fast enough and smart enough and lucky enough, they'd know soon. Lena was coordinating with the lab team when Kane found her. Preliminary results are in, the colonel said. Initial exposure group is responding to treatment. No secondary infections detected in healthcare workers. No breach in quarantine protocols. She paused. We might actually pull this off. Might? We've still got 48 hours of monitoring before we can confirm containment. But Kane allowed herself a small smile. We're winning. Because of you. Because of your team. Who would have been working blind without you? You knew this facility. You knew where the weaknesses were. You'd already identified half the sabotage systems before we even arrived. Kane's expression turned serious. And I understand you were terminated this morning, minutes before we showed up. Word travels fast. Federal investigation travels fast. My people have been interviewing your former administrators. They're trying very hard to explain why they fired their most qualified emergency responder during an active crisis. Lena felt something cold settle in her chest. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just recognition. The truth finally being acknowledged. There's more, Kane continued. The sabotage investigation has narrowed down to 3 potential suspects. All of them had been flagged in safety reports. All of them had been protected by senior staff who didn't want to deal with the paperwork or the disruption. She paused. Your reports. Your documentation. It's going to be evidence in a federal terrorism case. Through the observation window, Lena could see the ER, still chaotic but functional. Patients being treated. Lives being saved. The system working the way it was supposed to when people actually gave a damn. Director Voss wants to speak with you, Kane said. So does Dr. Thorne, and the hospital's legal team. Everyone suddenly very interested in having a conversation. I bet. What do you want to do? Lena was quiet for a long moment, watching the patients, watching her colleagues, watching the military and civilian medicine working side by side in perfect synchronization. I want to finish my shift, she said finally. We've still got people who need help. Kane smiled. Lieutenant Hart, when this is over, we're going to have a longer conversation. About what you've been doing here, about what you could be doing. She glanced at the ER. But you're right, shift first. The colonel walked away, leaving Lena alone with her thoughts and the view of the emergency room that had tried to throw her away. Behind her, footsteps approached. Multiple sets. Lena turned to find Voss, Thorne, and the hospital's chief of staff, a man named Donald Chen, who usually operated from the executive wing and rarely ventured into actual medical areas. Ms. Hart, Voss's voice was carefully controlled. We need to discuss what happened this morning. You mean when you fired me? That was hasty. Given the circumstances, we're prepared to reverse that decision. Full reinstatement, back pay, a formal apology. No! The word dropped like a stone. Voss blinked. I'm sorry? I said no. You don't get to fire me and then pretend it didn't happen because it suddenly became inconvenient. Lena's voice stayed level, professional. You made a choice this morning. You chose politics over safety, reputation over patient care, and pride over competence. That's not something an apology fixes. Chen stepped forward. Ms. Hart, I understand you're upset, but I'm not upset. I'm done. With this hospital, with administrators who ignore safety concerns, with a system that punishes people for caring too much. She gestured toward the ER. Those soldiers out there? They didn't ask for my credentials. They didn't question my experience. They trusted me because I knew what I was doing. That's the difference. We made a mistake, Thorne said quietly. We should have listened. Yes, you should have, but you didn't. And the only reason you're here now is because the federal government is about to investigate every decision you've made for the past 6 months. Lena met their eyes, one by one. You're not sorry you were wrong. You're sorry you got caught. Voss's expression hardened. If you think you're going to leverage this situation into some kind of... I'm not leveraging anything, I'm stating facts. You removed qualified personnel during an emergency. You ignored documented safety concerns that led to federal investigation. You actively protected the people who sabotaged critical equipment. Lena's voice never rose, never wavered. Colonel Kane's team has already documented all of it. What you did this morning isn't just wrong, it's criminal negligence. The silence that followed was absolute. Chen found his voice first. The hospital will cooperate fully with the investigation. Senior staff will be placed on administrative leave pending. That's between you and the federal investigators, Lena interrupted. I'm going back to work, actual work, saving actual lives. She walked away, leaving them standing in the corridor, watching her return to the ER where patients needed her more than politics did. The next few hours blurred together. More patients stabilized. More test results came back negative for secondary exposure. The quarantine protocols held. Slowly, carefully, the immediate crisis began to transform from acute emergency to managed situation. Around hour 12, Lena finally took a break. She found herself in the same staff bathroom where this had all started, washing blood from her hands again, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She looked tired, older than 29, but her eyes were clear. The door opened. Maya, the nurse who'd burst into the conference room, leaned against the doorframe. "Everyone's talking about you," she said. "Great." "No, they're saying you saved us, that without you this would have been a complete disaster." "I did my job. That's it. That's not what the military medics are saying. They're telling anyone who'll listen that you ran the most efficient crisis triage they've ever seen, that you knew exactly which equipment was compromised before anyone even tested it, that you—" Maya paused. "Who are you, really?" Lena dried her hands slowly. "I'm a nurse, like you. Nurses don't get called lieutenant by Army colonels. Some do, if they served first. How long? 8 years. Special Operations Medical Team, 3 deployments. Did things I can't talk about in places I can't name." Lena met Maya's eyes in the mirror. "And then I came home and thought I could just be normal. Help people without the uniforms and the guns and the classified shit. Turns out, problems follow you." "Why didn't you say anything about your background?" "Because I wanted to be judged on my work, not my resume. And look how well that worked out." Maya was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, some of us noticed. We saw you fixing things, catching mistakes, keeping people alive. We knew you were different, better. Not different enough to matter when it counted. Maybe, Maya gestured back toward the ER. "Maybe this is when it counted, when everything broke, when they needed someone who'd seen worse and survived." Before Lena could respond, Carlos appeared in the doorway. "Hart, Colonel wants you. Something's happening." The mobile command center had been set up in the parking lot, a modified transport trailer full of communications equipment, tactical displays, and enough processing power to coordinate a small war. Kane was standing in front of a bank of monitors, talking rapidly into a radio. She waved Lena in. "We've got confirmation," Kane said without preamble. "The sabotage investigation identified the source, hospital maintenance supervisor named Robert Vickers. He's been on the payroll for 6 years, passed every background check, seemed completely clean. And 3 months ago, he received a wire transfer from an offshore account. $50,000. 2 weeks later, the systematic equipment degradation started." Kane pulled up a photo. A man in his 50s, forgettable features, the kind of person who blended into backgrounds. He had access to everything: maintenance schedules, equipment logs, safety reports. He knew exactly what to break and when. Where is he now? In federal custody, arrested 20 minutes ago. He's already trying to cut a deal, giving up his handlers. Kane's expression was grim. "This was a test run, Hart. Whoever's behind this wanted to see if they could compromise a medical facility, if they could deploy a biological weapon in a civilian setting, if response protocols could be overwhelmed." The implications crashed down like a wave. They were testing the system. And they almost succeeded. If you hadn't been documenting the equipment issues, if you hadn't flagged the anomalies, if they'd managed to get you out of the building before we arrived. Kane didn't finish. She didn't need to. "What happens now?" "Now we spend the next 72 hours making absolutely sure nothing leaked. We monitor every patient, every staff member, every visitor. We treat this like the act of terrorism it is." Kane paused. And we figure out what to do with a hospital that nearly became a mass casualty site because its leadership was more interested in protecting reputations than protecting patients. Through the command center window, Lena could see Silvergate Medical Center, her workplace for 18 months, the place that had just tried to erase her, now crawling with federal investigators and military personnel. The hospital's going to fight this, she said quietly. They'll have lawyers, PR firms, political connections. They'll try to spin this as an unavoidable attack instead of administrative negligence. Let them try. We've got your documentation. We've got evidence of ignored safety concerns. We've got testimony from staff who watched qualified personnel get fired during an emergency. Kane's smile was sharp. And we've got the fact that a former special operations medic they treated like an inconvenience turned out to be the only reason everyone in that building didn't die. Lena thought about Voss's face in the conference room, about Thorne's desperate attempt at apology, about Chen's careful offer of reinstatement. They want me to come back, she said. Full reinstatement, back pay, apology, acting like this morning didn't happen. What did you tell them? I told them no. Good. Kane turned to face her fully. Because I want you somewhere else. Working with people who will actually listen when you speak. Solving problems instead of being punished for finding them. You're recruiting me. I'm offering you a choice. USAMRIID is expanding its civilian facility assessment team. We need people who understand both military protocol and civilian medicine. People who can identify vulnerabilities before they become massacres. People who've proven they'll do the right thing even when it costs them everything. Lena looked at the colonel, at the command center, at the military operation that had descended on her quiet nurse's life like an airstrike. Can I think about it? Take your time. But Hart, Kane's expression softened. You saved a lot of lives today. Not because someone ordered you to. Not because you were following a protocol. Because when everyone else was falling apart, you remembered what mattered. Lena nodded slowly, turned to leave. One more thing, Kane called after her. The investigation is also looking into who protected Vickers, who ignored the safety reports that would have caught him, who created a culture where documentation was treated as troublemaking instead of due diligence. Good, Lena said, and meant it. She walked back into the hospital, her hospital, whether they wanted to admit it or not, and returned to the work that mattered. Hour 18. A patient flatlined in isolation ward 3. Lena was there in seconds, directing resuscitation, working alongside a military medic half her age who followed her orders without hesitation. They got a pulse back, stabilized vitals, saved a life. Hour 24. The first wave of patients cleared for release from isolation. Negative tests. No secondary infection. Proof that the containment had worked. People would go home, would live, would never know how close they'd come to being index cases in an engineered pandemic. Hour 30. Dr. Thorne approached Lena near the ICU. He looked exhausted, defeated, older. I wanted to say, he struggled with the words, everything you reported, everything we ignored. You were right. About all of it. I know. I'm going to recommend to the board that our entire safety protocol system be rebuilt from the ground up, with you leading the revision. I'm not coming back, Lena said simply, but thank you for finally listening. He nodded, accepting that, and walked away. Hour 36. Maya found Lena in the break room, both of them running on caffeine and adrenaline. The rumor is you're leaving, Maya said, going to work for the military again. Maybe. Still deciding. We need people like you here, people who actually care, who know what they're doing. This hospital just proved it doesn't want people like me. It wants people who follow orders and don't make waves. Lena took a sip of terrible coffee. I'm done swimming against that current. Then where you go? Take me with you. Lena looked up, surprised. I'm serious, Maya continued. I've been watching you, how you work, how you think, the way you handle crisis. Whatever you do next, whatever that colonel is offering, I want to be part of it. It won't be easy. Military medicine is different, harder, more dangerous. Good. I'm tired of easy. I'm tired of politics mattering more than patient care. Maya's jaw set. Teach me. Lena studied her. Young, idealistic, but with steel underneath. The kind of person who might actually survive what came next. I'll talk to Kane, she said finally. No promises. Maya's smile could have powered the hospital for a week. Hour 48. The critical monitoring window closed. No new infections, no protocol breaches, containment confirmed. What could have been the start of a nationwide biological crisis was now classified as a contained incident, bureaucratic language for disaster averted. Kane came to find Lena in the ER. It's done. The agent is neutralized. Patients are recovering. Vickers is in custody and singing like a canary. She paused. We won. This time. This time. Next time. Kane's expression darkened. There will be a next time. Someone else will try something similar. We'll target another weak point in our medical infrastructure. We'll hope that bureaucracy and negligence will do half their work for them. And you want me to help prevent that. I want you to be the person who sees it coming, who documents it, who doesn't back down when convenient people tell her to be quiet. Kane held out a folder. Official offer. Take a week to think about it. Talk to Maya. She already submitted an application. I think she'd be an asset. Lena took the folder but didn't open it. What about this hospital? What about it? Are they going to face consequences? Real ones? Voss is being forced into early retirement. Chen is under investigation. Thorne is looking at formal censure from the medical board. The hospital itself will undergo a complete safety audit and administrative restructuring. Kane's smile was cold. The kind of restructuring that tends to result in a lot of people looking for new jobs. And the people who actually tried to fix things before this happened? Protected. The investigation will make it very clear who the heroes were and who the liabilities were. Your documentation saved more than lives today, Hart. It saved careers for the people who deserved saving. Behind them, the ER continued its eternal rhythm. Patients arriving, being treated, leaving. The cycle that never stopped, that couldn't stop, that depended on people who actually cared. I'll read the offer, Lena said, and I'll give you an answer before my week is up. Fair enough. Kane started to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, you would have been an asset to any hospital lucky enough to keep you. Their loss is my gain. After Kane left, Lena stood alone in the corridor, holding a folder that might determine her next decade, watching the hospital that had tried to throw her away continue its work. Carlos walked past, saw her, stopped. Hey, word is you're leaving for real. Thinking about it. Don't think too long. Some of us would follow you anywhere. He grinned. This place is going to collapse without you keeping it together. This place was collapsing before I got here. That's the problem. He considered that, nodded. Then go somewhere that won't waste what you bring to the table. And when you're running some elite military trauma unit, remember the little people. After he left, Maya approached with coffee, actual good coffee from somewhere outside the hospital. Peace offering, she said, for asking to follow you into whatever insanity you're planning next. Lena accepted the cup. You know it might be worse than this, right? Military operations, classified situations, places where the coffee is definitely worse. As long as it's meaningful work with people who respect competence over politics, I'll take it. Maya hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. This morning, when they fired you, you didn't fight back, didn't argue, just accepted it. Why? Lena was quiet for a long moment, thinking about conference rooms and bureaucracy, about all the times she'd stood alone against convenient narratives. Because I learned a long time ago that some battles can't be won with words. You have to wait, document, let the truth come out on its own schedule. She met Maya's eyes, and when it does, make sure you're standing where everyone can see who was right all along. That's cold. That's survival. In war, in medicine, in life. Sometimes the smartest move is to step back and let your enemies destroy themselves. Maya absorbed that. I have a lot to learn. Ma, yeah, you do. But you're asking the right questions. That's a start. They stood together, watching the ER, watching the aftermath of a crisis that could have destroyed everyone in it. Hour 72. The official quarantine lifted. Families could visit. Staff could leave. The hospital began its slow return to normal operations. Federal investigators were still everywhere, but the immediate emergency had passed. Lena finished her extended shift, actually multiple shifts strung together until she'd forgotten what day it was, and found herself back in the parking lot where everything had started. The military convoy was gone. The mobile command center had been packed up. Only Kane remained, leaning against a standard government sedan. "Made a decision?" the colonel asked. Lena pulled out the folder. She hadn't just read it. She'd studied every word, looked up every regulation referenced, researched every facility mentioned. "Two conditions," she said. "I'm listening." "First, Maya comes with me. Whatever training pipeline I go through, she does too. She's young, but she's smart and she gives a damn. That's more important than experience." "Agreed. What's second?" "I want access to the final investigation report. Not the public version. The real one. Every detail about how this hospital failed, who protected the failure, who ignored the warnings." Lena's voice hardened. "Because if I'm going to prevent the next attack, I need to understand exactly how this one almost succeeded." Kane studied her for a long moment, then smiled. A real smile, not the professional mask. "Deal. Report to Fort Bragg in 3 weeks. Bring Maya. Bring your documentation. And Hart." She extended her hand. "Welcome to the grown-up table, where competence actually matters." They shook, professional, firm, a handshake that felt like a door opening. "One question," Lena said. "Why me? There are other medics, other nurses with military backgrounds. Why specifically recruit me?" "Because when your career was on fire, when you'd been publicly humiliated and professionally destroyed, when you had every reason to walk away and let this hospital burn," Kane's expression turned serious. "You stayed. You did your job. You saved lives. That's not training, that's character, and character is what I need." She got in her car, drove away, left Lena standing in the parking lot with her acceptance letter and a future that was terrifying and exciting in equal measure. Lena turned to look at Silvergate Medical Center one last time. The building looked the same, the ER entrance with its ambulance bays, the windows of the conference room where she'd been fired, the corridors where she'd worked, where she'd been invisible, where she'd tried so hard to make a difference that nobody wanted her to make. A figure emerged from the entrance, Voss carrying a box, the universal symbol of someone who'd just been fired. She saw Lena watching. Their eyes met across the distance. Voss looked away first. "Thought you might still be here." Lena turned to find Dr. Thorne approaching. He looked tired, but somehow cleaner, like something heavy had been lifted. "Just leaving," Lena said. "I heard you're taking the military position." "Good. You'll do more good there than—" He gestured at the hospital. "Than here, where people who should know better keep getting in their own way." "You staying?" "For now. Chen's replacement wants a complete cultural overhaul. Someone has to help rebuild trust. Teach the next generation to actually listen when people flag problems." He paused. "I'm going to recommend they name the new safety protocol system after you, the Hart Protocol. Make sure everyone remembers what happens when we ignore people who care." "Don't." Lena's voice was sharp. "Don't turn me into some symbol or martyr. I was just a nurse doing my job. That should be normal, not noteworthy." "But it's not normal. That's the problem." Thorne met her eyes. "I'm sorry, for what that's worth. You deserved better." "Yeah, I did. But better found me anyway." She turned to leave. "Good luck, Dr. Thorne. Try to make sure the next person who speaks up doesn't have to go through what I did." "I'll do my best." "Do better than your best. People's lives depend on it." She walked to her car, a practical sedan that had survived 2 deployments and a medical career, and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, staring at the hospital, thinking about the 18 months she'd spent there, the patients saved, the problems documented, the cost of caring too much in a system that preferred convenient lies. Her phone buzzed. Text from Maya. "Officially accepted. When do we start?" Lena smiled. 3 weeks. "Hope you're ready for hell. Been there. Let's go back together." She started the car. Drove away from Silvergate Medical Center, from the job that had tried to break her, from the people who'd learned too late what they'd lost. And as the hospital disappeared in her rearview mirror, Lena Hart felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Free. But in a parking garage 3 blocks away, someone else sat in their car, watching hospital security footage on a laptop. Reviewing the crisis, studying the response, taking notes. The chemical attack had failed. The saboteur was in custody. The hospital had survived. But there were other hospitals, other vulnerable points, other Lena Harts who could be removed before they became problems. And next time, they'd be ready for someone like her. Next time, they'd make sure the right person wasn't there to stop them. The laptop closed. The car started. The planner disappeared into traffic, already designing the next test, the next attack, the next system to break. Because one battle won didn't mean the war was over. It just meant the enemy knew what to prepare for. 3 weeks felt like 3 minutes, and 3 years simultaneously. Lena spent the first few days sleeping, actual sleep, the kind that came from a body finally allowed to shut down after running on fumes and spite. Then came the paperwork, mountains of it. Federal background checks, medical clearances, security protocols that required her to list every place she'd lived since birth, and every person who might have reason to compromise her. Maya texted constantly, "Is this normal? They want my dental records. My dental records." "Welcome to federal employment," Lena replied. "Wait until they ask about your third-grade teacher." They already did. Fort Bragg looked exactly like Lena remembered. Sprawling, efficient, and designed by people who believed aesthetics were a waste of taxpayer money. The taxi dropped her at the main gate, where an MP checked her credentials 3 times before waving her through. Maya was already waiting near the processing center, looking simultaneously terrified and determined. "Ready?" Lena asked. "No, you?" "Haven't been ready for anything in years, hasn't stopped me yet." Colonel Kane met them in a conference room that smelled like old coffee and new anxiety. 2 other people were already seated, a man in his 40s with the weathered look of someone who'd seen too much sun in bad places, and a younger woman whose hijab was precisely pinned and whose eyes missed nothing. "Lieutenant Hart, Miss Rodriguez, meet your new team," Kane said. "Major David Walsh, combat medicine specialist. Dr. Yasmin Khalid, epidemiologist and bioweapons expert. You'll be working together on facility vulnerability assessments." Walsh nodded. Khalid smiled slightly. Maya looked like she might throw up. "Over the next 6 weeks, you'll undergo intensive training in threat assessment, biological warfare protocols, and institutional analysis," Kane continued. "This isn't medical school. This isn't nursing school. This is learning to see what people hide, to find the cracks before someone else exploits them." "How many hospitals are we talking about?" Lena asked. "In the immediate assessment queue? 47. Nationwide? Hundreds. The Silvergate attack wasn't random. Whoever planned it chose that facility for specific reasons. Outdated systems, stretched budgets, administrative dysfunction. Those vulnerabilities exist everywhere." Kane pulled up a map covered in red dots. Each dot is a facility that matches the risk profile. Underfunded, overworked, easy to compromise. "Jesus," Maya whispered. "No divine intervention here," Walsh said. His voice was gravelly, worn. "Just us, finding problems before they become mass casualties." The training was brutal, not physically, though there were enough dawn runs to remind Lena she wasn't 20 anymore, but mentally. They studied sabotage patterns, learned to spot maintenance discrepancies that suggested tampering, practiced interviewing administrators who had every reason to lie. Khalid taught them to think like terrorists, to identify which systems would cause maximum damage with minimum effort. "You're not looking for obvious threats," she explained during one session. "You're looking for subtle degradation, equipment that fails at exactly the wrong moment, protocols that create chaos instead of preventing it, the kind of sabotage that looks like bad luck until you see the pattern." 2 weeks in, Walsh pulled Lena aside after a particularly grueling simulation. "You're holding back," he said. "Excuse me?" "In the scenarios. You solve problems, you stabilize situations, but you're not pushing, not the way someone with your background should." Lena felt her jaw tighten. "I'm doing the work. You're doing the minimum to succeed. That's not the same thing." Walsh leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I read your file. Special operations medic, multiple commendations, saved lives in situations that should have been unsurvivable. Then you spent 18 months invisible in a civilian hospital." He paused. "What are you afraid of?" "I'm not—" "Bullshit. You spent a year and a half trying to disappear, and when that didn't work, you got punished for it. Now you're here, and you're still trying to be small." His eyes were sharp. "This job doesn't work if you're small. People die when you're small." The words hit like a punch. Lena started to respond, couldn't find the air. "Figure it out," Walsh said, not unkindly. "Because in 2 weeks, we deploy to our first assessment, and I need to know the person watching my back isn't still afraid of being seen." That night, Lena sat in her assigned quarters, a Spartan room that reminded her of a dozen deployments, and stared at her phone. She'd avoided social media since leaving Silvergate, but curiosity finally won. She searched the hospital's name. The headlines were everything Kane had promised. Federal investigation reveals systematic negligence at Silvergate Medical. 3 administrators fired following bioterrorism incident. Hospital staff ignored years of safety warnings. And buried in one article, a quote from an anonymous source. There was one nurse who kept trying to fix things. They got rid of her right before everything exploded. Makes you wonder who the real problem was. Lena closed the browser, opened her messages, found Maya's latest text. Walsh says I'm too eager. You're too cautious. Think we can average out to functional? We'll figure it out, Lena typed back. Always do. The first deployment came faster than expected. A hospital in rural Montana, small, isolated, serving a community of maybe 8,000. The kind of place that should have been safe, boring, beneath notice. Except it's not, Khaled explained during the flight. 3 months ago, their medication dispensary system had a critical failure. 2 months ago, their backup generator failed during a storm. Last month, their water filtration system went offline for 6 hours. Could be bad luck, Maya suggested. Could be. But the statistical probability of 3 unrelated system failures in 3 months? Khaled shook her head. We need to look. The hospital administrator was a woman named Dr. Sarah Brennan, 50s, tired, and deeply suspicious of federal intervention. She met them in her office with the kind of forced politeness that barely concealed hostility. I appreciate your concern, she said, but we've already conducted internal reviews of all 3 incidents. Equipment failure happens. We're a small facility with limited resources. We understand, Lena said, keeping her voice neutral. We're just here to verify that the failures were isolated. Standard procedure after the Silvergate incident. Brennan's expression tightened at the mention of Silvergate. We're nothing like that disaster. Our staff is competent. Our protocols are sound. I'm sure they are, Walsh interjected smoothly. This is just paperwork, federal boxes to check. The faster we verify everything's secure, the faster we're gone. Brennan clearly didn't believe him, but she also didn't have a choice. Fine, but don't disrupt patient care. We're already stretched thin. Over the next 3 days, the team systematically tore apart the hospital's infrastructure. Not physically, but every maintenance log, every equipment record, every personnel file got scrutinized. Maya handled the interviews, her youth and apparent nervousness making staff less guarded. Khaled analyzed the technical failures, looking for patterns. Walsh coordinated with local law enforcement, checking for unusual activity. And Lena walked the halls, watching, listening, remembering what it felt like to be the nurse nobody took seriously. On day 2, she found what she was looking for. The medication dispensary room was secure, biometric locks, access logs, regular audits. But the ventilation system shared a duct with the janitor's closet next door. And the janitor's closet had a basic key lock that looked like it had been picked recently. Check the access logs for the dispensary, Lena told Maya. Every entry for the past 6 months. Maya pulled the data. Looks normal. Staff pharmacists, attending physicians, charge nurses, all authorized. Now check the HVAC maintenance records. Specifically, any work done on the ventilation in this corridor. Maya's fingers flew across her tablet, then stopped. There was an emergency repair 4 months ago, duct cleaning, logged by... She looked up, confused. By someone named Jay Morrison. But there's no Jay Morrison on the current staff roster. Because Jay Morrison doesn't exist, Lena said quietly. Someone used a fake credential to get access to the ventilation system, to the dispensary. Walsh appeared in the doorway. Found something? Someone's been in the medication room, not through the front door, through the air ducts. They had access to everything, could have tampered with inventory, contaminated supplies, mapped security protocols. Why hasn't anything happened yet? Maya asked. Because this was reconnaissance, Khaled said, joining them. Whoever did this was learning, testing. The equipment failures weren't attacks, they were probes, seeing what breaks easily, what draws attention, what gets fixed quickly. Walsh's expression went dark. They're choosing targets, and this hospital just made the list. The meeting with Brennan was tense. She sat behind her desk, face pale, as Khaled laid out the evidence. The fake credential, the unauthorized access, The suspicious timing of the equipment failures. This can't be right, Brennan said. We have security, protocols. How could someone, the same way they did it at Silvergate, Lena interrupted, by exploiting the gaps between what's supposed to happen and what actually happens? Your biometric locks are excellent, your access logs are meticulous, but your maintenance protocols assume everyone accessing utility areas is legitimate. So, what do we do? Upgrade security on all utility access points? Audit every contractor who's worked here in the past year. Implement continuous monitoring of critical systems. Walsh ticked off the list. And accept that you're now under federal protection whether you like it or not. How long? Until we catch whoever's planning this. Could be weeks. Could be months. Brennan looked like she wanted to argue, to insist this was overreaction, to protect her hospital's reputation. But the evidence was undeniable. Do what you need to do, she said finally. That night, the team gathered in their rented house, a drafty place on the edge of town that the military used for extended operations. Maya was pacing, nervous energy burning through her. How many hospitals are they scouting? She asked. How many have already been compromised and we just don't know it yet? That's what we're trying to find out, Walsh said. He was nursing a beer, his second of the night. Each assessment gives us more data, more patterns to recognize. But we're always behind, Lena said. They choose the targets. They set the timeline. We're just catching up. So we get ahead, Khaled suggested. We stop reacting and start predicting. Use the pattern to identify their next target before they're ready. How? By thinking like them. They're choosing hospitals with specific vulnerabilities, outdated systems, budget constraints, isolated locations. Rural facilities are easier to compromise than urban ones, places where one or two people can access critical infrastructure without drawing attention. Khaled pulled up her tablet, started mapping. If we overlay equipment failure reports with maintenance contractor activity and staff turnover rates, 3 hours later they had a list. 12 hospitals across 7 states, all matching the profile, all vulnerable, all potentially already compromised. We can't assess them all, Maya said. Not fast enough. No, Lena agreed, but we can prioritize. Start with the most isolated, the most vulnerable. Work our way through. Walsh made a call. Kane would send additional teams to cover the other facilities, but the 4 of them would take the highest priority target, a small hospital in northern Alaska, serving a community of indigenous residents and oil workers. 200 miles from the nearest major city, limited local law enforcement, and according to recent reports, experiencing a troubling series of equipment malfunctions. We leave in 2 days, Walsh said. Pack for cold weather and expect hostility. Nobody likes federal agents showing up in small towns. Lena spent those 2 days reviewing everything they'd learned. The patterns were clear now. Whoever was behind this wasn't random. They were systematic, methodical, building towards something larger. Each compromised hospital was a data point, a test case, a step toward a goal she couldn't quite see yet. On the flight to Alaska, squeezed into a military transport that rattled like it might disintegrate, Maya leaned close. What if we're wrong? She asked quietly. What if this is just coincidence and we're seeing patterns that aren't there? Then we've wasted some time and annoyed some administrators, Lena replied. But if we're right and we do nothing, people die. A lot of people. The hospital in Alaska was called North Ridge Medical Center, and it looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and stubbornness. 2 stories, weathered siding, surrounded by tundra and darkness. The administrator was a man named Thomas Garrett, late 60s, indigenous, with eyes that had seen enough federal intervention to last several lifetimes. Let me guess, he said when they arrived. You're here to help. We're here to verify your facility's security, Walsh said. Uh-huh. And when you're done verifying, what happens? You shut us down? Declare us unsafe? Force expensive upgrades we can't afford? Garrett's voice was bitter. This community needs this hospital. We serve people who have nowhere else to go. We're not here to shut you down, Lena said. We're here to make sure you're not targeted. Targeted by who? People who want to hurt a lot of innocent people. People who see isolated facilities like yours as easy opportunities. She met his eyes. People who've already been here. That got his attention. What are you talking about? Over the next hour, they showed him the evidence. The pattern of equipment failures, the suspicious contractor activity, the The way North Ridge matched every vulnerability profile they'd identified. Son of a bitch, Garrett said finally. The HVAC repair. 3 months ago. Guy came in, said he was preventative maintenance, spent 2 days in the mechanical systems. Did you verify his credentials? He had paperwork, looked official. We're used to contractors coming and going. Oil companies send maintenance teams up here all the time. Garrett's expression darkened. You're saying he was fake. We're saying we need to check everything. The assessment took 5 days. The facility was small enough that they could examine every system, every access point, every potential vulnerability. And what they found was worse than Lena had feared. The fake contractor hadn't just mapped the facility. He'd installed hardware, tiny devices hidden in HVAC ducts, medication storage areas, even the emergency generator room. Not bombs, not overtly destructive, just small computers transmitting data. They're monitoring everything, Khaled said, examining one of the devices under a portable microscope. Patient admissions, staff schedules, medication inventory, power consumption, building a complete operational picture. For what? Maya asked. For knowing exactly when this hospital is most vulnerable, when staff is stretched thin, when critical equipment is at capacity, when an attack would cause maximum damage. Walsh was already on the phone with Kane, voice tight. We need a full tactical team, electronic surveillance countermeasures. And we need to start looking at every hospital on our list right now, because if they did it here, they did it everywhere, Lena finished. Garrett stood in the corner watching his hospital being dissected by federal agents, looking like someone who'd just discovered his home had been violated. Can you fix this? He asked quietly. We can remove the surveillance, Khaled said. We can upgrade your security, but we can't stop them from trying again unless we catch them first. Then catch them. We're working on it. But the truth was harder than that. The devices transmitted to an encrypted server somewhere outside U.S. jurisdiction. The fake credentials used to install them were expertly crafted. Whoever was behind this had resources, training, and enough patience to build their operation over months or years. This is bigger than hospitals, Walsh said during a late-night strategy session. This is infrastructure testing. They're learning how to compromise soft targets across the country. Medical facilities today, maybe schools tomorrow, or transportation hubs, or anything that would cause panic and casualties if it failed catastrophically, Lena said. They're building a playbook. And we're trying to stop them with 4 people and good intentions, Maya added. Great odds. The breakthrough came on day 7. Khaled had been analyzing the transmission patterns from the surveillance devices, looking for anything that might identify their destination or controller. Most of the data was encrypted, but occasionally the devices transmitted diagnostic information, location checks, battery status, signal strength. Look at this, she said, pulling up a map. The devices at all 4 compromised facilities transmitted their diagnostic checks at exact 12-hour intervals. Same timestamp, adjusted for time zones, like they're all controlled by a central system on a strict schedule. Military precision, Walsh observed, or someone trained by military systems, someone who thinks in terms of synchronized operations and centralized command. Khaled zoomed in on the transmission times. And there's something else. 3 times in the past month, all the devices went dark simultaneously for exactly 90 seconds, then came back online. System reboot, Maya suggested. Maybe. Or, Khaled's eyes widened, or a scheduled meeting, someone physically accessing the central server, which requires shutting down remote transmissions for security. 90 seconds is just enough time to swap data storage or receive new instructions. Can you predict when the next shutdown will happen? Khaled ran the numbers. If the pattern holds, tomorrow, 1400 hours Eastern Time. Walsh was already dialing. We need NSA surveillance on every known server location that could be hosting this network. If someone physically accesses it during the shutdown window, we need eyes on them. Kane's response came fast. Approved. But Hart, if this goes wrong, if we tip them off that we're onto their surveillance, they'll accelerate their timeline, Lena said. Whatever they're planning, they'll do it sooner rather than risk losing the element of surprise. Exactly. So we get one shot at this. The next 24 hours were the longest of Lena's life. They maintained normal operations at North Ridge, pretending they hadn't found anything, while federal agents around the country quietly positioned themselves near potential server locations. The team stayed glued to Khaled's equipment, watching the minutes tick down. At 13:55 hours, Walsh's phone rang. He listened, his expression unreadable, then hung up. "They've got movement," he said. "Server location in Baltimore. Small commercial building, registered to a shell company. Someone's inside right now." 13:58 hours. The surveillance devices were still transmitting. 13:59 hours. Still transmitting. 1400 hours. All the devices went dark simultaneously. "That's it," Khaled whispered. "Whoever's in that building is at the server right now." In Baltimore, federal agents were moving in. But carefully, they needed to identify the person, confirm what they were doing, build a case that would hold up in court. 60 seconds passed. 70. 80. At 90 seconds, the devices came back online, and Walsh's phone rang again. "Talk to me," he answered, listened. His face went pale. "Say that again." He hung up slowly, looking at the team with an expression Lena had seen before, usually right before someone told her a mission had gone sideways. "They got into the building," Walsh said, "but the server room was empty. No equipment, no people. Just a laptop running a remote access program." "What?" Khaled leaned forward. "That's impossible." The shutdown signature was a trap. The person we're chasing knew we'd find the surveillance devices eventually, knew we'd track the transmissions. The whole 90-second shutdown pattern was designed to draw us to that location. Walsh's hands clenched into fists. While we were busy raiding an empty room, someone was watching, learning how we operate, how fast we can respond, what resources we deploy. "Jesus," Maya breathed. "It gets worse," Walsh continued. "During the shutdown window, while all our attention was on Baltimore, there was a spike in access attempts at 7 other hospitals on our watch list. Someone was probing their systems, testing their security, all synchronized with the moment we were distracted." Lena felt ice settle in her stomach. "They're not just ahead of us, they're using us. Our investigation is giving them intelligence on what we know and how we respond. Which means every move we make is potentially compromising another facility," Khaled said. The room fell silent except for the monitoring equipment humming in the background. "We need to go dark," Lena said finally. "Stop all overt investigations. Make them think we've backed off or given up. Then hit them from a direction they're not watching." "What direction?" Maya asked. "The one nobody expects. We stop chasing their surveillance network and start chasing them." Lena turned to Walsh. "The fake maintenance contractors, the forged credentials, the shell companies. Someone's creating those, someone's coordinating the field operatives. Find that person, and we find the whole operation." "That could take months," Walsh said. "Then we better start now." Kane approved the new approach within hours. The overt investigation officially concluded with a bland report about enhancing general security protocols. To anyone watching, it would look like the federal government had gotten bored and moved on. But behind the scenes, a different hunt began. Financial analysts tracked shell company transactions. Forensic specialists examined the forged credentials for manufacturing tells. Intelligence officers combed through surveillance footage from compromised facilities, looking for the same face appearing multiple times. And Lena's team went back to doing assessments, but quietly now, deliberately telegraphing their movements to draw attention, while other teams did the real work invisibly. 3 weeks into the new approach, Maya noticed something odd. "The shell companies," she said, pulling up financial records. "They all have different names, different registration states, but they share something. Look at the bank accounts they use for transactions." The numbers meant nothing to Lena, but Walsh leaned in, his expression sharpening. "Those routing numbers," he said slowly. "I've seen that bank before. It's a small regional institution in Virginia. Why would multiple shell companies spread across the country all use the same obscure bank?" "Because someone made a mistake," Lena said. "Got comfortable using a familiar institution. Didn't think anyone would notice the pattern. Or couldn't avoid it," Khaled suggested. "If the person running this operation has a personal connection to that bank, lived in the area, worked there, has family there, it might be hard to resist using familiar resources." The bank records led to an address. The address led to a name. The name led to a retired Army logistics officer named Marcus Trent, who'd left the service under ambiguous circumstances 5 years earlier. And when federal agents finally knocked on his door in suburban Richmond, They found a basement full of forged documents, fake credentials, and detailed maps of 37 hospitals across 12 states. But they didn't find Marcus Trent. His neighbors said he'd left 2 days earlier, packed a single bag, didn't say where he was going. And in that basement, pinned to a corkboard above his workstation, was a printed photograph from the Silvergate Medical Center crisis. A photograph of Lena. The photograph had been taken from security footage, grainy, slightly out of focus, but unmistakably Lena standing in the Silvergate ER during the crisis. Someone had printed it, studied it, circled her face in red marker. Beneath the image, a single handwritten note, "Problem solver." Walsh photographed the board before the forensics team could bag everything. Sent it to Lena's phone while she was still in Alaska, wrapping up the Northridge assessment. "He's been tracking you specifically," Walsh said over the call. "Not the team, not the investigation, you." Lena stared at her own face on the screen. The red circle made her look like a target, which she supposed she was. "How long?" "Based on the dates on some of these documents, since Silvergate, maybe before." Walsh's voice was tight. "Hart, this guy didn't just run when we got close. He ran because we got close to you. He knows you're the threat." "Good. Let him run scared." "That's not—" Walsh stopped himself. "You know what happens when cornered animals get scared?" "Yeah, they bite." Lena closed the photo. "Find him before he does." But Marcus Trent was a ghost. His car was found abandoned at a train station in Delaware. His bank accounts hadn't been touched. No credit card activity, no phone signals, no digital footprint of any kind. He'd vanished using the same tradecraft he'd taught soldiers for 20 years. "He's got resources we don't know about," Kane said during the emergency briefing at Fort Bragg. "Safe houses, cash supplies, probably alternative identities. He could be anywhere." "Then we make him come to us," Lena said. Everyone turned to look at her. "He's been watching me, building a file. That photograph wasn't random. He sees me as the person who disrupted his operation at Silvergate, who figured out the pattern, who's dangerous." She met Kane's eyes. "So we use that. Make me visible. Make me the obvious threat. See if he takes the bait." "Absolutely not," Walsh said immediately. "You're talking about making yourself a target." "I already am a target. This just makes it official. And when he comes for you, when he decides removing the threat is easier than running, then we're ready, with a perimeter, backup, surveillance." Lena's jaw set. "And we end this." Maya looked horrified. Khaled looked calculating. Kane looked like someone weighing unacceptable options against worse alternatives. "I'll think about it," the colonel said finally. The decision came faster than expected. 2 hospitals on their watch list reported simultaneous equipment failures, different systems, different states, but the same signature pattern of sabotage. Trent wasn't just running, he was accelerating, triggering contingencies, trying to salvage his operation before everything collapsed. "He's desperate," Khaled said, analyzing the failure reports. "Rushing, making mistakes he wouldn't have made 6 months ago." "Which makes him more dangerous," Walsh countered. "Desperate people don't calculate risk, they just act." "Then we act first." Kane's expression was granite. "Hart, you're approved for the operation, but with conditions. You wear a tracker at all times. You're never alone. And the moment this feels wrong, we pull you out. Clear?" "Clear." "Good. Because if Marcus Trent is watching you, we need to give him a reason to move, somewhere we control, somewhere we can see him coming." They chose a hospital in Pennsylvania, mid-sized, suburban, exactly the kind of facility that matched Trent's target profile. The administration was read in on the operation and surprisingly cooperative, especially after seeing the evidence of what had happened elsewhere. Over 48 hours, a visible security presence was established, upgrades were installed, and Lena's team conducted a very public, very thorough assessment. And Lena made sure she was seen. Walking the perimeters, checking access points, standing in locations where external surveillance would have clear lines of sight. She felt exposed, watched, like a deer in a clearing waiting for the wolf. "How do you know he'll come, us?" Maya asked on the second day. They were in a hospital break room, surrounded by undercover agents pretending to be maintenance workers and administrative staff. "I don't. But if he doesn't, we keep doing this until he does. Eventually, he'll either run out of resources or patience. And if he runs out of patience first, then things get interesting. Day 3. Nothing. Day 4. A suspicious vehicle was spotted near the hospital, but turned out to be a local contractor legitimately working in the area. Day 5. Walsh was getting restless, Khalid was recalculating probabilities, and Kane was starting to question whether Trent would take the bait at all. Then day 6, 0320 hours. The hospital's motion sensors triggered in the basement maintenance corridor. Security responded and found nothing, but the sensor logs showed something had moved through the space, something human-sized, something that knew exactly where the cameras were. "He's inside," Walsh said, reading the tactical feed. "He got past external security somehow." "Not somehow. He knows how federal teams operate. He trained them." Lena was already moving toward the basement access. "He's not here to sabotage equipment, not with this much security. He's here for something else." "For you," Maya said quietly. The basement was a maze of pipes, storage rooms, and mechanical systems, exactly the kind of environment where Trent would have the advantage. Walsh wanted to flood the area with agents, lock it down, force a confrontation on their terms. But Lena knew better. He'll have an exit strategy. Multiple exits. The moment he sees a tactical response, he'll disappear into whatever hole he crawled in through. She checked her sidearm, a weapon she'd hoped not to need but had carried every day since Silvergate. "Let me draw him out, get him talking. He came here for a reason." "The reason is probably killing you," Walsh said flatly. "Maybe. Or maybe he wants to know how we found him, how we broke his network, how someone from Silvergate became his biggest problem." Lena started toward the stairs. Either way, he's not leaving here free. The basement was dark, quiet, except for the hum of HVAC systems and the distant drip of water. Lena moved through the corridors slowly, deliberately, making herself visible to anyone watching. She could feel agents positioned above, covering exits, ready to move. But down here, she was alone. "I know you're here, Trent," she said, not shouting but letting her voice carry. "The whole building's locked down. Federal agents at every exit. You've got nowhere to go." Silence. Then from somewhere to her left, "Neither do you, Lieutenant." The voice was calm, educated, tinged with the particular weariness of someone who'd seen their plans unravel. Lena turned slowly toward the sound, keeping her weapon ready but not raised. "You're right," she said. "So how about we skip the part where you try to escape and I try to stop you? Talk instead." "About what? How thoroughly you've destroyed 2 years of work?" Trent emerged from behind a support column, 50s, average height, with the kind of forgettable face that made him perfect for covert operations. He wasn't armed, or at least his hands were empty. "You have no idea what you've ruined." "Enlighten me. Do you know how many hospitals in this country are one bad day away from catastrophic failure? How many are held together with inadequate funding and administrative negligence?" Trent's eyes were sharp, assessing. "I was documenting vulnerabilities, creating a database of weaknesses so they could be addressed before someone malicious exploited them. By installing illegal surveillance and forging credentials and sabotaging equipment?" Lena's voice was flat. "That's not documentation. That's reconnaissance for an attack." "An attack by who? Me? I'm retired military logistics, not a terrorist." He spread his hands. "I was hired to assess vulnerabilities. That's what I did." "Hired by who? Does it matter? Someone with enough resources and reach to coordinate across multiple states? Someone who wanted to know exactly how fragile our medical infrastructure is?" Trent paused. "Someone you'll never find because you're looking in the wrong direction." Lena's finger moved closer to her trigger. "You're saying you're not the top of the chain. I'm saying I'm barely the middle. The network you've disrupted, it's one branch of something much larger. And by focusing all your attention on me, on hospitals, you've missed the actual threat. Which is? I don't know. I was compartmentalized. Given specific targets, specific objectives, I followed orders, documented what I found, reported up the chain." His expression was almost sympathetic. "You think you've won something here, caught the bad guy, saved the day. But all you've done is alert them that someone's paying attention. Now they'll adapt, change tactics. And next time, you won't see it coming. Then help us stop them." "Why would I do that?" "Because you're going to federal prison either way. The only question is whether you go as the architect of a terrorist plot or as a cooperating witness who helped prevent something worse." Lena took a step closer. "You said you were documenting vulnerabilities. Fine. Tell us everything you documented. Every target, every weakness, every person you reported to. Give us something we can use. Trent studied her for a long moment. You really think you can stop this? I stopped you. No, you interrupted me. There's a difference. He smiled, sad and knowing. But I'll give you credit. You're tenacious. Silvergate should have been a contained disaster. Instead, you turned it into a federal case, made yourself visible, made yourself a problem. He paused. That's why they wanted you eliminated. The words hung in the stale basement air. Who wanted me eliminated? Lena's voice stayed level despite the ice in her chest. Whoever's running the operation. When you became too visible at Silvergate, when your name started appearing in investigation reports, they flagged you. Told me to assess whether you were a manageable risk or a critical threat. His eyes were steady. I told them you were critical, that you'd keep digging, keep connecting dots, keep being a problem. They agreed. Authorized direct action. You were supposed to kill me. No. I was supposed to arrange for you to be removed from the equation, discredited, transferred, fired, whatever it took to neutralize your effectiveness. Killing draws attention, makes martyrs. Much easier to just ruin someone's reputation and career. He gestured around the basement. But then you joined USAMRIID, became officially untouchable. That's when the operation shifted from containment to acceleration. If they couldn't stop you from investigating, they'd finish the groundwork before you could disrupt it. Lena's mind raced, connecting pieces. The recent equipment failures, the rushed sabotage. They're not preparing for future attacks. They're executing now. Close. They're positioning final assets. The reconnaissance phase is over. Whatever they're planning, it's in the implementation stage. Trent's expression darkened. And I don't know the timeline. I don't know the targets. I was cut out of the loop 2 weeks ago when you started getting too close. But you know who's running it. You reported to someone. A handler, dead-drop communications, encrypted channels. Never met face-to-face, standard operational security. He paused. But I kept copies, insurance, in case I needed leverage. Names, bank accounts, communication logs. Everything I could document about the people above me in the chain. Where? Safe deposit box. Bank in Maryland. You'll need a warrant, my key, and probably a federal judge willing to move fast. He pulled a small key from his pocket, held it up. This gets you access. Everything else is your problem. Walsh's voice crackled in Lena's earpiece. We're moving in. Get him secured. Trent heard it too, saw Lena's eyes flicker, read the tactical movement about to happen. He tossed the key. Lena caught it reflexively. One more thing, he said as boots thundered down the stairs. The photograph in my basement. I wasn't tracking you to eliminate you. I was tracking you because I knew eventually you'd be the one to find me. And I wanted to make sure when that happened, I'd have something to trade. Agents poured into the corridor, weapons up, voices commanding. Trent went to his knees smoothly, hands behind his head, the picture of compliance. But as they cuffed him, he looked at Lena one last time. They're already moving. Whatever the endgame is, it's happening. And you've got maybe 48 hours to stop it before people start dying in numbers that'll make Silvergate look like a drill. The safe deposit box contained exactly what Trent promised. USB drives full of encrypted files, handwritten notes, copies of wire transfers. It took Khaled and her team 6 hours to crack the encryption and another 4 to process what they found. The scope was staggering. Not 37 hospitals, not 12 states. 83 facilities across 26 states, all carefully selected, all systematically compromised over 18 months. Medical centers, water treatment plants, food distribution hubs, critical infrastructure woven into the fabric of civilian life. And all of it reported to a single coordinating entity listed only as Sentinel Group. This isn't terrorism, Khaled said, her face pale in the harsh light of the analysis center. This is preparation for total infrastructure collapse. If even a quarter of these targets are activated simultaneously, cascade failure, Walsh finished. One system collapse triggers another. Hospitals can't function without water. Water systems can't be monitored without power. Power grids can't be maintained without communication networks. Everything interconnected, everything vulnerable. And Trent was just mapping it, Lena said. Someone else is planning to pull the trigger. Who's Sentinel Group? Maya asked. Unknown. The financial trail goes through 6 shell companies and 3 offshore accounts before hitting a wall. Whoever they are, they're well-funded and extremely careful. Caleb pulled up a timeline. But based on the communication logs, there's a pattern. Trent received new instructions every Friday at 1800 hours. Last Friday, he got a message that just said Phase 3 initiated. 3 days ago. What's Phase 3? We don't know. But 2 days ago, 7 facilities on this list reported critical equipment failures. Yesterday, 4 more. Today, 3 more. She highlighted the locations on a map. They're accelerating, building towards something. Kane had been silent through most of the briefing, reading through Trent's documentation with the focused intensity of someone calculating acceptable losses. Finally, she looked up. We need to notify Homeland Security, CDC, FEMA. Coordinate a national response, lock down every facility on this list, implement emergency protocols, prepare for potential mass casualty events across multiple states. That'll take days, Walsh said, maybe weeks to fully coordinate. Then we start now. Hart, your team takes point on medical facility assessment. Walsh, coordinate with local law enforcement at each site. Caleb, I want predictive analysis, which targets are most likely to be activated first based on the patterns we've seen. There's another option, Lena said quietly. Everyone looked at her. Trent said he reported to a handler. Communication logs show regular contact over 18 months. That handler knows the full operational picture, all the targets, all the timelines, all the people involved. She met Kane's eyes. We use Trent's access to set up a meeting. Draw the handler out. Take them down before Phase 3 can be completed. That's insane, Maya said. If the handler suspects anything, then we're exactly where we are now, playing defense across 83 facilities with limited resources and no timeline. Lena's voice was steady. But if we get the handler, we get everything. The whole network, every person involved, every target planned. We cut the head off before the body can act. Kane considered it for maybe 10 seconds. Do it. But carefully. If this goes wrong, we lose our only link to Sentinel Group. Trent was surprisingly cooperative when they explained the plan. Not enthusiastic, but resigned, like someone who'd already calculated the odds and accepted the outcome. The handler calls himself Mitchell. Don't know if that's real or operational. We meet every 6 weeks to exchange information and receive new assignments. He provided call signs, communication protocols, dead drop locations. Next meeting is scheduled for 3 days from now. Arlington. If I don't show, he'll know something's wrong. Then you show, Lena said. With us watching every angle. He's good. Professional. If he sees anything that feels wrong, surveillance, tactical presence, anything, he'll vanish. You won't get a second chance. Then we make sure nothing feels wrong. The next 72 hours were a nightmare of preparation. The meeting location was a public park in Arlington. Open sight lines, multiple exits, impossible to secure without being obvious. The handler had chosen well. Walsh wanted to flood the area with plainclothes agents, but Lena knew that would never work. Trent said this guy is professional. That means he's looking for anything out of place. Extra maintenance workers. Too many people on phones. Cars parked too long. She studied the park layout. We need to be invisible. Invisible doesn't work when we need to move fast if things go wrong, Walsh countered. So we don't move fast, we move smart. Lena traced a route on the map. Trent meets him here at the North Bench, standard dead drop, envelope with documentation, quick conversation, separate. We put a tracker in the envelope, let him leave, follow at distance. See where he goes, who he talks to, what he does next. And if he checks the envelope for surveillance devices, then he finds a tracker that's exactly where Trent would put it. On the outside of the documentation package, clearly visible, obviously meant as insurance in case Trent got arrested. Lena looked up. Make it look like Trent's desperate play to stay useful. Something a cornered operative would do. Caleb nodded slowly. It could work. If the handler thinks Trent is trying to maintain value, trying to stay relevant to Sentinel Group despite being compromised, he might accept the tracker as a reasonable precaution. Or he might shoot Trent and disappear, Maya said. That's why we have Overwatch, Walsh said. Sniper positions on the surrounding buildings. Not to take the shot, just to cover if things fall apart. The day of the meeting was cold, gray, the kind of weather that made everyone hurry instead of loiter. Perfect for their purposes. Trent sat on the north bench at exactly 1400 hours, holding a newspaper, the agreed signal. He looked nervous, which was good. Nervous was believable. Lena watched from a coffee shop across the street, pretending to work on a laptop. Walsh was 2 blocks away in a surveillance van. Maya and Khaled were positioned at separate exits, ready to follow. A dozen other agents were scattered throughout the area, all carefully invisible. At 1407 hours, a man approached the bench. 50s, business casual, carrying a messenger bag. He sat down beside Trent, didn't look at him, opened a book. "You're compromised," the handler said. Lena could hear it through Trent's wire. "Federal custody, released on cooperation agreement. Why should I believe anything you have is legitimate?" "Because you need to know what they found," Trent replied. His voice was steady, practiced. "They've got the facility list. They're coordinating a national response. Phase 3 is blown unless you accelerate or pivot." Silence. The handler turned a page in his book. "What else?" "They're looking for you, for Sentinel Group. They've got financial trails, communication logs. They're close." "Then why are you here instead of in a cell?" "Because I traded information for freedom. Gave them enough to look useful, held back enough to stay valuable. They think I'm their asset now." Trent pulled out the envelope. "Everything they know is in here. And everything they don't know. Your choice what you do with it." The handler took the envelope slowly. Didn't open it, just held it, weighing the situation. "You put a tracker in this," he said finally. Trent didn't hesitate. "Of course I did. If I'm going down, I'm taking insurance. You want the information, you accept the tracker. You don't want it, walk away. But know that in 48 hours, every facility on that list is going to have federal protection." The handler smiled slightly. "You always were practical." He stood, tucked the envelope into his bag. "This doesn't buy you back in. You understand that." "I understand I'm alive and free. That's enough." "For now?" The handler walked away, casual, unhurried. Just another person leaving a park on a cold afternoon. He didn't check for surveillance, didn't look around, just walked to a car parked 3 blocks away, got in, drove off. And every federal agent in the area tracked him without moving from their positions. "We've got him," Walsh said over the comms. "Vehicle tracking active. Air support deployed. He's not getting away." But Lena felt cold watching the car disappear into traffic. It had been too easy. The handler had accepted the tracker too readily. Had bought Trent's story without enough pushback. "Something's wrong," she said. "What?" "I don't know. But that felt scripted. Like he knew what we'd do and played along anyway." "You're paranoid," Walsh said. "We've got eyes on him. Multiple layers of surveillance. There's no way he slips this." The car drove for 20 minutes, following a route that seemed random, but probably wasn't. Then it pulled into a parking garage in downtown Arlington. The handler got out, walked to the elevator, went up 6 floors, and disappeared. "Where'd he go?" Walsh demanded. "We've got all exits covered." "He's still in the building," one of the surveillance team reported. "Tracker shows him on the 6th floor office building, multiple companies. We're getting a floor plan now." But Lena was already moving, a terrible certainty building in her chest. She ran across the street, into the parking garage, up the stairs because the elevator was too slow, hit the 6th floor breathing hard, and followed the tracker signal down a corridor lined with office doors. The signal came from a men's bathroom. She kicked the door open, weapon raised. Found the envelope taped to the inside of a toilet tank. The tracker still transmitting faithfully. But no handler, no messenger bag, no person. "He made us," she said into her radio. "He knew about the tracker, probably knew about the surveillance. He ditched everything and walked out clean." "That's impossible," Walsh said. "We've had eyes on every exit since he entered. Then he didn't use an exit. He used something else. A maintenance corridor, a connected building, something we missed." Lena stared at the envelope, feeling the operation collapse around them. "He played us. And now he knows exactly what we know." Back at the command center, Kane's expression was carved from stone as she watched the debrief. "Trent set us up," Walsh said. "His cooperation was a performance. He fed the handler everything while making it look like intelligence gathering." "No," Lena said. Everyone turned to look at her. Trent's information was legitimate, the facility list, the communication logs, all of it checked out. He didn't lie to us. Then how did the handler know? Because Sentinel Group has someone inside, watching our investigation, feeding them intelligence about what we know and how we're responding. She looked at Kane. They've been ahead of us this whole time because someone's been telling them where we're looking. The implications settled over the room like fallout. You're saying we have a leak, Kane said quietly. I'm saying we have a mole, someone with access to operational details, investigation progress, tactical plans, someone who knew we were setting up the Arlington meeting and warned the handler. Lena's mind raced through possibilities. How many people knew about today? Core team plus tactical support, maybe 20 people total. Kane's jaw clenched. All vetted, all cleared, all supposedly trustworthy. Supposedly. Hart, if you're wrong about this, then we apologize later. But if I'm right and we do nothing, Phase 3 completes and thousands of people die while we're chasing our tails. Lena met the colonel's eyes. We need to go dark. Shut down all operational communications. Trust nobody outside this room. And move fast before whoever's feeding Sentinel Group tells them we're on to the leak. Kane was silent for 10 seconds. That felt like 10 hours. Then she reached for her phone, made a call that lasted exactly 15 words, and hung up. As of now, this investigation is compartmentalized. No outside communication without my direct authorization. No sharing of tactical plans beyond essential personnel. She looked around the room. And someone get me a list of every person who had access to the Arlington operation. We're going hunting. But before anyone could move, Khaled's equipment lit up with alerts. Multiple alerts. Emergency notifications from facilities across the country. We've got activations, she said, her voice tight. 7 hospitals reporting simultaneous critical failures. Different systems, different states, all within the last 3 minutes. Phase 3, Lena said. It's not just hospitals. Khaled pulled up a broader feed. Water treatment plants in Ohio and Oregon, power substations in Texas and Michigan, food distribution centers in California and Georgia, all critical infrastructure, all failing simultaneously. The map on the screen looked like a virus spreading across the country. Red dots multiplying, systems collapsing. The careful, interconnected infrastructure that kept millions of people alive beginning to fracture. Casualties? Kane demanded. Too early to tell. But if these failures cascade, if secondary systems start failing because primary systems are down, Khaled didn't finish. She didn't need to. Walsh was already coordinating emergency response. Maya was on comms with CDC. The room erupted into controlled chaos as people tried to respond to a crisis unfolding across 6 time zones simultaneously. And Lena stood in the middle of it, watching the map, watching the red dots multiply, and understood with terrible clarity that they'd been outmaneuvered from the start. Sentinel Group had never intended to hide. They'd intended to delay, to keep federal resources scattered and reactive until the moment they triggered everything at once. The surveillance devices, the reconnaissance, the careful mapping of vulnerabilities, it had all been building toward this moment, when the entire infrastructure web would start tearing itself apart. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, then something made her answer. Lieutenant Hart. The voice was calm, cultured, familiar from the park. You're watching the map right now, seeing it all fall apart, wondering how to stop it. The handler. Tell me where you are, Lena said quietly, and we can end this. This ends when Sentinel Group decides it ends. Not before. But I wanted you to understand something. You were right about the mole. There is someone inside your investigation feeding us information. He paused. In fact, they're in the room with you right now. Lena's blood turned to ice. She looked around the command center, at Walsh coordinating tactical response, at Maya managing communications, at Khaled processing data, at Kane directing operations, at a dozen other people she'd worked beside for months. One of them was the enemy. Who? She demanded. Figure it out yourself. You're the problem solver. The line went dead. Lena didn't move, didn't react, just kept the phone to her ear for 3 more seconds like the conversation was still happening, then lowered it slowly. Around her, the command center churned with crisis response. People shouting coordinates, pulling up facility schematics, coordinating emergency teams. Nobody watching her. Nobody noticing. Good. She walked to Kane, keeping her voice low. I need to speak with you, privately. Now. The colonel read something in Lena's expression and nodded. They moved to a small equipment room off the main floor, bare walls and harsh lighting. The door closed. Sound dampened. "The handler just called me," Lena said. "Confirmed we have a mole. Said they're in this room right now." Kane's face went completely still. "He's trying to fracture us, create paranoia when we need unity. Maybe. Or he's telling the truth because he knows we can't stop Phase 3 even if we identify the leak." Lena pulled out her phone, showed the call log. Unknown number. Either way, someone in that room has been feeding Sentinel Group our every move for months. "Who do you suspect?" "Everyone. No one. I don't know." Lena's jaw tightened. "But I know how to find out. We feed different information to different people. See which version reaches Sentinel Group. Whoever's information appears is the mole." "That takes time we don't have. People are dying right now. Then we work both problems simultaneously. Continue crisis response with the full team. But compartmentalize the mole hunt. You, me, and one other person you trust absolutely." Kane considered for maybe 5 seconds. "Walsh. He's been with USAMRIID for 15 years. Multiple combat deployments. If I can't trust him, we're already lost." They brought Walsh into the equipment room. His expression shifted from confused to angry as Lena explained the handler's call. "Son of a bitch," he breathed. "You're sure it's not a psyop?" "No, but we can't ignore it." Lena pulled up the facility map on her tablet. "Here's what we do. We tell the full team we've identified 3 high-priority targets that need immediate on-site assessment. Maya gets location A. Khaled gets location B. Everyone else gets assigned to various support roles for location C. Each location is real. Each is currently failing. Each needs actual intervention." "But," Walsh asked, "but we also feed each person slightly different intelligence about what we think Sentinel Group is planning next. Maya hears we think they're targeting hospitals in the Northeast. Khaled hears we think water systems in the Midwest. The rest hear power grids in the South." Lena met their eyes. "Whoever's feeding information will report what they heard. When Sentinel Group moves, we'll know who talked." "That's cold," Walsh said. "That's survival." Lena's voice was flat. "And it's the only play we have that doesn't involve interrogating our entire team while the country burns." Kane nodded slowly. "Do it, but carefully. If the mole suspects we're testing them, they won't. Everyone's too focused on the crisis to notice the test." Lena hoped that was true. The briefing happened fast. Maya got her assignment, a hospital in Connecticut experiencing cascading equipment failures. Khaled got Wisconsin, where a water treatment plant had gone offline, contaminating the municipal supply. The rest of the team scattered to coordinate support operations across multiple states, and woven into each briefing, carefully embedded in the chaos, were the false intelligence threads. Maya absorbed hers without question, already moving toward the door. "Northeast hospitals, makes sense. Highest population density, maximum casualties." Khaled nodded at hers, fingers already flying across her tablet. "Midwest water systems, classic bioterrorism vector. I'll model contamination spread patterns during the flight." The others accepted their information with the same grim efficiency. Nobody questioned. Nobody hesitated. Everyone just grabbed their gear and ran because people were dying and there wasn't time for doubt. Lena watched them go, feeling sick. One of those people, maybe Maya, who'd followed her from Silvergate, maybe Khaled, who'd taught her to think like a terrorist, maybe someone else she'd trusted with her life, was the enemy. And she wouldn't know which until it was too late to stop the damage. "Now what?" Walsh asked once the room had cleared. "Now we wait. Monitor Sentinel Group's movements. See which target they hit next." Lena pulled up the surveillance feeds, and pray we're wrong about there being a mole at all. But they weren't wrong. 4 hours later, while Maya was wheels up to Connecticut and Khaled was en route to Wisconsin, Sentinel Group activated a coordinated attack on 6 hospitals across the Northeast corridor. Different facilities than the ones currently failing, but perfectly positioned to overwhelm the region's medical capacity when combined with existing crises. Maya's false intelligence had leaked, which meant Maya was... Wait. Lena stared at the map, something nagging at her. "Pull up the exact timing of the activations." Walsh did. The attacks had triggered at 1847 hours. Maya's flight had departed at 1820. Wheels up, airborne, no communications access except emergency channels. She couldn't have made contact with her handler from the plane, Lena said slowly. Not that fast. Not with that level of detail about specific facilities. Unless she made contact before the flight, Kane suggested. During the briefing. We were all in the same room during the briefing. She didn't touch her phone. Lena's mind raced. What if we're looking at this wrong? What if the leak isn't about someone making active contact? What if it's passive? Something that transmits automatically? Khalid's words from weeks ago echoed. The devices transmitted diagnostic information on a strict schedule. The trackers, Lena breathed. We all wear trackers. Standard protocol for field operations. What if one of those trackers has been modified? Transmitting not just location, but audio? Everything we say, everything we hear, all of it going straight to Sentinel Group in real time? Walsh was already pulling up the equipment logs. Everyone's tracker was issued from the same batch 3 months ago. Standard USAMRIID hardware, all tested and verified before deployment. Tested by who? By... Walsh stopped, scrolled back through the logs. By the equipment officer assigned to our unit, Captain James Rivera. Lena had met Rivera exactly twice. Brief encounters, professional, forgettable. He handled logistics, equipment distribution, maintenance schedules. The kind of support role that was essential but invisible. The kind of position that would have access to everyone's gear without raising questions. Where is he now? Kane asked. Walsh checked the duty roster. Off-site, personal leave, has been for the past week. Since right before we closed in on Trent. Lena felt pieces clicking into place. He knew we were getting close, took leave to create distance. But he'd already done the damage, compromised our trackers, fed Sentinel Group everything we said, positioned himself safely away from the investigation. We need to bring him in, Walsh said. No. Lena's voice was sharp. If we go after him directly, Sentinel Group knows we've identified the leak. They'll burn everything, scatter, and we'll never find them. But if we let Rivera think he's still hidden, we use him, Kane finished. Feed him information that benefits us. Exactly. Lena pulled out her tracker, a small device clipped to her belt, seemingly innocent. We keep wearing the compromised trackers, keep acting like we don't know. But everything we say from now on is theater. Disinformation designed to make Sentinel Group move in predictable ways. That's risky, Walsh said. If they suspect, then we're exactly where we are now. But if they don't suspect, if they keep listening, we can turn their intelligence advantage into our weapon. Lena looked at Kane. Your call, Colonel. Kane stared at the tracker in Lena's hand, at the map showing cascading failures across the country, at the impossible choice between bad options and worse ones. Do it, she said finally, but carefully, because if this backfires, we won't get another chance. The next 6 hours were the most delicate operation Lena had ever conducted. Every word spoken in the command center was calculated, designed to paint a picture of an investigation going in circles. They talked about chasing dead ends, about losing Trent's cooperation, about being overwhelmed by the scope of Phase 3. They sounded defeated, disorganized, desperate. And they watched Sentinel Group's response. The attack slowed, not stopped, but the pace decreased, like an enemy who thought they'd already won and didn't need to rush, like an organization confident that federal response was collapsing under the weight of too many simultaneous crises. They're buying it, Walsh said quietly, watching the tactical displays. They think we're broken. Good. Lena was coordinating with Maya and Khaled remotely, using secure channels they knew were compromised to feed more false information. Telling Maya the Connecticut situation was unsalvageable. Telling Khaled that Wisconsin's water supply was contaminated beyond recovery, painting a picture of comprehensive failure. But on a separate, truly secure channel, one routed through Kane's personal encrypted device, never mentioned aloud, known only to the three of them, the truth was different. Maya had stabilized Connecticut, found the sabotage, isolated the compromised systems, prevented the cascade. Khaled had contained Wisconsin, deployed emergency filtration, coordinated with local authorities, kept the contamination from spreading. Across the country, the facilities Sentinel Group thought were failing were actually holding. The red dots on the public map showed disaster. The red dots on the private map showed controlled crisis. And the gap between those two realities was the trap. They're going to realize eventually, Walsh warned. When casualties don't materialize, when systems they think are down keep functioning, then we need to move before they realize. Lena pulled up financial records, the shell companies from Trent's files, the wire transfers, the money trail that led to Sentinel Group. They've been operating on the assumption that we're too slow, too bureaucratic, too fractured to respond effectively. What if we prove them wrong in a way they can't ignore? How? By hitting their money, all of it, simultaneously. Lena highlighted the accounts. We've got federal warrants. We've got the account numbers. We coordinate with Treasury, freeze every asset, seize every account, cut off their operational funding in one stroke. That tips them off that we've been playing them, Kane said. Yes, but it also cripples them. Whatever they have planned next, they'll need resources to execute. Cash to pay operatives, accounts to wire funds, infrastructure to coordinate. Take that away, and they're reduced to whatever assets they have in play right now. Which are considerable, Walsh pointed out, but finite and trackable. Once they're cut off from reinforcement, every move they make exposes them further. Lena met Kane's eyes. We've been playing defense this whole time, reacting to their attacks, chasing their timeline. It's time to make them react to us. Kane thought for maybe 10 seconds. Then she picked up her phone, made 3 calls, and set in motion a financial takedown that would later be classified and redacted from official records. At 0200 hours, Treasury agents hit every account simultaneously. Millions of dollars frozen mid-transfer. Shell companies seized. Financial infrastructure dismantled in coordinated raids across 4 continents. The money that had fueled Sentinel Group's operation for years vanished in the space of 20 minutes. And Lena watched the compromised tracker on her belt, waiting for the reaction. It came at 0217. Emergency encrypted communication from someone using Trent's old protocols, demanding to know what was happening, why accounts were frozen, who had compromised operational security. They'd panicked. Broken protocol. Used a traceable channel because the alternatives were worse. Walsh triangulated the signal in 40 seconds. Arlington. Same neighborhood as the park meeting. They've got a safe house there. Not for long, Kane said. She authorized a tactical team, full raid authority, and clearance to use whatever force necessary. But Lena was already moving toward the armory. I'm going with them. Hart, you're not tactical. I'm the one they've been tracking, the one they see as the threat, the one whose photograph was on Trent's wall. Lena checked her sidearm, grabbed body armor. If we're ending this, I'm there when it ends. Walsh started to argue, saw her expression, and just nodded. I'm driving. The safe house was a townhouse in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and everyone minded their own business. Perfect for covert operations, terrible for escaping federal raids. Tactical teams surrounded it in darkness, thermal imaging showing 3 heat signatures inside. Walsh coordinated the approach while Lena watched from the command vehicle, wearing full tactical gear and feeling like she'd stepped back into a deployment she'd left behind years ago. We've got movement, one of the tactical leads reported. Someone's trying to exit through the basement. Block it, Walsh ordered. Nobody leaves. The breach happened fast. Flashbangs, shouted commands. The controlled violence of professionals doing a job they'd practiced 1,000 times. Lena moved in with the second wave, weapon ready, following the path Tactical had cleared. Inside, they found exactly what Trent had promised. A complete operations center. Computer servers, communication equipment, files and documents spread across tables. And 3 people, 2 operatives who surrendered immediately, and 1 man in his 60s who looked at Lena with recognition and something almost like respect. Lieutenant Hart, he said calmly. I wondered if you'd figure it out. Who are you? Lena asked. Does it matter? I'm just another contractor, another person following orders. For Sentinel Group, for an organization that recognized what most people refuse to see, that our infrastructure is fragile, that our systems are vulnerable, that we're one coordinated attack away from collapse. He smiled slightly. We were testing that thesis. Apparently you proved it wrong. By stopping you. By adapting, responding, doing exactly what the system is supposed to do when challenged. He gestured around the safe house. You've won this round, Lieutenant. Congratulations. This round? Lena's finger moved closer to her trigger. How many rounds are there? As many as it takes. You've disrupted Sentinel Group's current operation, frozen our funding, captured our personnel. But the vulnerabilities we identified still exist. The weaknesses we exploited are still there. Eventually, someone else will test them, someone who learned from our mistakes. Then we'll stop them too. Maybe, or maybe next time they won't be testing. They'll be attacking for real. His expression stayed calm even as tactical teams cuffed him. You're very good at your job, Lieutenant, but you can't fix a broken system by catching the people who expose it. Eventually, you have to actually fix the system. They dragged him out, seized the equipment, started processing the intelligence that would take months to fully analyze. And Lena stood in the empty safe house, hearing his words echo, and knew he was right. Back at Fort Bragg, dawn was breaking when they finally compiled the initial assessment. Sentinel Group's immediate operation was dismantled, finances frozen, personnel captured, infrastructure seized. The facilities they'd compromised were being secured. The attacks had been stopped. Phase 3 had failed. But the cost was visible on every face in the command center. People who'd been running on adrenaline and desperation for days, who'd watched infrastructure fail and didn't know if they'd stopped it in time. Casualties? Lena asked. Kaled pulled up the numbers. 14 dead, mostly in the initial attacks before we understood the scope. Another 100 hospitalized. Could have been thousands. Should have been thousands based on their planning. Why wasn't it? Because we had you. Kane's voice was tired but steady. You recognized the pattern at Silvergate. You pushed the investigation when everyone else wanted to move on. You identified the surveillance network. You found the mole. You turned their intelligence advantage into their weakness. She paused. 14 people died, but you saved thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Rivera? Lena asked. Arrested 3 hours ago, fully cooperating now that he knows the operation is burned. He's confirmed everything, the modified trackers, the passive surveillance, his recruitment by Sentinel Group 2 years ago. Walsh pulled up the interrogation logs. He thought he was helping identify vulnerabilities for defensive purposes. Didn't realize until too late that he was enabling an attack. Do we believe him? Does it matter? He's facing federal charges either way. Life in prison? Minimum. Maya and the rest of the team were filtering back in, exhausted but alive. Maya saw Lena and smiled, tired, relieved, real. We did it, she said simply. Yeah, we did. Lena felt the weight of the past week settling on her shoulders. How's Connecticut? Stable, contained. They're calling it a miracle that the system's held. Maya's smile widened slightly. I told them it wasn't a miracle. It was just good crisis management and someone who taught me to look for what everyone else misses. Around them, the command center was slowly transforming from crisis mode to recovery mode. People were still working, still coordinating, but the desperate edge had dulled. The cascade had been stopped. The infrastructure was holding. The country wasn't collapsing. Kane called Lena into her office as the sun fully rose. Close the door, the colonel said. Lena did. Stood at attention, suddenly aware that she hadn't slept in 36 hours and probably looked like a disaster. At ease. Kane gestured to a chair. Sit before you fall over. Lena sat, feeling every hour of the past days in her bones. The investigation is going to take months to fully process, Kane began. Sentinel Group had connections we're still mapping, resources we're still seizing, but the immediate operation is over. You stopped it. The team stopped it. Don't. Kane's voice was sharp. Don't diminish what you did. You were fired from Silvergate for doing your job too well. You could have walked away. Could have stayed bitter. Instead, you turned that injustice into motivation, into the reason you were ready when Sentinel Group made their move. Lena didn't know how to respond to that. You're being promoted, Kane continued. Captain, effective immediately, and you're being assigned command of a new task force. Infrastructure vulnerability assessment and response. Permanent team, federal authority, full resources. Colonel, that's not a request, Captain Hart. That's recognition of competence. Something you should have gotten at Silvergate but didn't. Kane's expression softened slightly. You've proven you see what others miss. That you act when others hesitate. That you won't back down when the system tries to make you small. That's exactly what this work needs. Outside the office, through the window, Lena could see the command center. See Maya coordinating with field teams. See Walsh reviewing tactical reports. See Kaled processing intelligence data. See the machinery of crisis response functioning because they'd held it together when it tried to break. What about the vulnerabilities? Lena asked. The ones Sentinel Group identified. They weren't wrong about the infrastructure being fragile. No, they weren't. Which is why your new task force will work to fix them, not by exposing them for attack, by securing them before someone else tries. Kane pulled out a file, slid it across the desk. Your first assignment. 83 facilities, 26 states. You know them all. Lena opened the file, saw the list she'd been chasing for months, saw the vulnerabilities laid bare, saw the work that needed doing. We start immediately? She asked. You start after you sleep for 12 hours. Then you start immediately. Kane stood, extended her hand. Welcome to the permanent fight, Captain. Try not to get yourself killed. They shook. Professional, firm. The handshake of two people who understood that winning one battle didn't end the war. Lena walked out of the office, past the command center that was slowly emptying as people rotated off shift. She found Maya in the parking lot, loading gear into a car. Heading back to base? Lena asked. Actually, Colonel just offered me a position, some new task force. Maya grinned. Said the lead investigator specifically requested me. You know anything about that? Might have mentioned you were useful. Lena allowed herself a small smile. You still interested in following me into whatever comes next? Always. Maya's expression turned serious. What happened at Silvergate? Getting fired, being humiliated, having your career destroyed, that could have broken you. Instead, you used it. Turned it into fuel. Made it the reason you were ready when it mattered. Or I got lucky. No, you got competent, and you stayed competent even when people punished you for it. Maya gestured back at the command center. This work you're doing now, this task force Kane's building, it exists because you wouldn't let Silvergate be the end. You made them see you, made them recognize what they'd lost, made them understand that the quiet nurse they fired was the soldier they needed. Lena thought about Voss, about Thorne, about the conference room where they'd tried to erase her. Thought about standing alone under fluorescent lights while people decided she was the problem. Thought about walking away from that building knowing she deserved better. They made a choice, she said quietly. To protect reputations over patience, to value politics over safety, to punish the person who cared too much. She met Maya's eyes. I just made sure that choice had consequences. And now? Now we make sure it never happens again. To anyone. Lena headed toward her car. Get some rest, Maya. We've got 83 facilities to secure and probably 100 more after that. It's going to be a long fight. Good, Maya smiled. I'm tired of short ones. Lena drove back to her quarters as the sun climbed higher, feeling exhaustion settling into her bones. She should sleep, should rest, should let the past weeks fade into memory. But first she pulled up her phone, opened her contacts, found a number she'd saved months ago but never called. Dr. Sarah Brennan, administrator of North Ridge Medical Center, the hospital in Alaska where they'd first found Sentinel Group surveillance. The phone rang 3 times before Brennan answered. Lieutenant Hart? The woman sounded surprised. Is everything... Captain Hart now, and everything's fine, contained. The operation that threatened your facility has been dismantled. Lena paused. I'm calling because I wanted you to know. The vulnerabilities we identified at North Ridge, the systems that were compromised, the security gaps we found. We're going to fix them. All of them. Properly funded. Properly supported. No more being told to make do with inadequate resources. Silence on the line. Then, you're serious. Completely. You said your community needs that hospital, that people have nowhere else to go. Lena's voice was steady. I'm making sure the hospital is there for them, that it's secure, that it won't be a target again. Why? Brennan asked. Why specifically call to tell me this? Because someone should have done it for Silvergate, should have listened when problems were reported, should have fixed what was broken before it cost lives. Lena thought about 18 months of trying to be invisible, of being punished for caring, of standing alone against convenient neglect. I can't change what happened to me, but I can make sure it doesn't happen to others. Another pause. Then Brennan's voice, thick with emotion. Thank you, Captain. Thank your community for trusting us to get this right. We will. Lena hung up, sat in her car outside her quarters, watching the sun paint the sky in colors that felt earned after the darkness. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then training overrode exhaustion, and she picked up. Captain Hart. The voice was familiar, the handler from Arlington. Congratulations on your promotion. Well deserved. Lena's blood went cold. You're supposed to be in custody. The man you arrested was an operations coordinator. Useful, competent, but ultimately replaceable. The handler's tone was almost amused. Did you really think Sentinel Group was small enough to dismantle in one raid? What do you want? To tell you something you've already figured out, that we were testing vulnerabilities, and you proved the system can adapt when properly motivated. That's valuable information. Useful intelligence. A pause. But tests end eventually, and what comes after tests? The line went dead. Lena sat holding the phone, staring at the unknown number, feeling cold certainty settle over her. They'd won the battle, stopped Phase 3, dismantled the operation, saved thousands of lives. But somewhere, someone was already planning Phase 4. Lena didn't report the call immediately, not because she was hiding it, but because she needed to think. The handler's words circled in her mind like predators. Tests end eventually, and she understood what he hadn't said aloud. Sentinel Group wasn't defeated. It was watching, learning, preparing for whatever came next. She slept for 4 hours instead of 12, woke with a plan forming, and walked back into the command center before most people had finished their first coffee. Kane looked up from a stack of intelligence reports, eyebrows raised. You're supposed to be resting. The handler called me, after the raid, after we arrested his coordinator. Lena pulled out her phone, played the recording she'd had the presence of mind to capture. He wanted me to know that we didn't win, that we only passed a test. The colonel's expression went from tired to sharp in an instant. When? 2 hours ago, from another unknown number, already traced and dead-ended at a burner phone. Lena sat down across from Kane's desk. He's telling us that Sentinel Group is bigger than what we shut down, that Phase 4 is already planned, that we're still reacting instead of anticipating. Then we keep working, keep finding them, keep shutting them down until there's nothing left to shut down. Or we change tactics completely. Lena leaned forward. They've been testing our infrastructure for vulnerabilities, mapping our weaknesses, building a playbook for how to break critical systems. What if we beat them to publication? Kane frowned. Explain. Everything Sentinel Group documented, every vulnerability, every exploit, every weakness they identified across 83 facilities, we make it public. Not the specifics that would enable copycat attacks, but the patterns, the systemic failures, the administrative negligence that made those facilities targets in the first place. Lena's voice gained momentum. We expose the problem they were exploiting, make it impossible to ignore. Force the conversation about infrastructure security into public consciousness. That would cause panic, undermine confidence in medical systems. It would create accountability. Right now, administrators like the ones at Silvergate can bury safety concerns, ignore warnings, punish people who speak up, and face no consequences until disaster strikes. But if we make the vulnerability public, if we show that fixing these problems is possible and necessary, we shift the pressure. Lena met Kane's eyes. Make it politically toxic to ignore safety. Make it career suicide to punish whistleblowers. Make it so the next nurse who sees a problem and speaks up gets listened to instead of fired. Kane was quiet for a long moment, considering. That's a substantial shift in approach, the kind that requires approval at levels above my pay grade. Then get that approval. Because the alternative is waiting for Phase 4 and 5 and 6, playing defense forever against an enemy that learns from every engagement. Lena's jaw set. I'm tired of playing defense. 3 days later, Lana stood in a briefing room in Washington, facing a panel of officials whose combined authority could reshape policy or bury it forever. Homeland Security, CDC, FEMA, congressional oversight. People who'd seen her file, read the reports, and understood that what she was proposing was either brilliant or career-ending. Captain Hart, the Homeland Security Deputy Director, began, You're suggesting we publish a comprehensive analysis of vulnerabilities in our medical infrastructure. Vulnerabilities that were actively exploited by a domestic terrorism network. Help me understand how that doesn't create a roadmap for the next attack. Because we're not publishing the specifics. We're publishing the patterns. Lena had rehearsed this, refined it, made sure every word landed precisely. Sentinel Group succeeded because they found facilities with outdated equipment, deferred maintenance, and administrators who ignored safety concerns. Those aren't secrets. Those are documented failures that exist in public records, budget reports, and safety complaints. We're just connecting the dots and making it impossible to pretend those dots don't exist. And when the public panics, the CDC representative asked, when people stop trusting hospitals because they know the systems are vulnerable, then hospitals fix the systems. Administrators who've been deferring critical maintenance suddenly find budget. Boards who've been protecting reputations over safety suddenly face consequences. The system improves because the cost of not improving becomes too high. Lena paused. Right now, the only people who pay the price for infrastructure failure are patients and the staff trying to save them. I'm suggesting we shift that burden to the people making the decisions that create failure. By publicly shaming them, someone said, by publicly holding them accountable. There's a difference. The debate lasted 2 hours. Arguments about operational security, public relations, political fallout. Lena answered each concern with data, with evidence, with the calm precision of someone who'd survived their own public shaming and understood exactly what transparency could accomplish. Finally, the Homeland Security Deputy Director leaned back in his chair. If we approve this, and I'm not saying we are, what happens to you, Captain Hart? You become the face of this initiative, the person who exposed systemic failure in American healthcare infrastructure. That's going to make you extremely unpopular in certain circles. I've been unpopular before. I survived. This would be different, more public, more permanent. Good. Lena's voice didn't waver. Because I want every administrator who's thinking about firing a nurse for reporting safety concerns to remember what happened when they tried it with me. I want them to know that silence isn't protection anymore, that the truth has a way of surfacing, that the person they're dismissing might be the one who exposes them. Silence around the table. Then the deputy director smiled slightly. You're either very brave or very reckless, Captain. I'm someone who got fired for doing my job well, who watched people die because problems were ignored, who's tired of watching the system protect itself instead of the people it's supposed to serve. Lena met their eyes, each person in turn. So yes, I'll be the face of this. I'll take the heat. Because someone has to, and I've already survived the worst they can throw at me. The approval came through in 72 hours. Conditional, limited, with enough oversight to choke an elephant, but approval nonetheless. The public release was carefully orchestrated, not an intelligence dump, but a structured report compiled by federal agencies, documenting systemic vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure with specific recommendations for improvement. Hospital facilities were anonymized, but patterns were clear. Budget failures were documented. Deferred maintenance was quantified. Administrative negligence was exposed in careful clinical language that made it impossible to dismiss. And Lena gave the press conference that accompanied it. She stood at a podium in Washington, wearing her uniform, looking directly into cameras that would broadcast her words across the country. No prepared statement, no teleprompter, just her, the microphone, and the truth she'd been trying to tell for 2 years. My name is Captain Lena Hart. 18 months ago, I was a nurse at Silvergate Medical Center. I reported safety concerns, equipment failures, maintenance problems that put patients at risk. I was told those concerns were inappropriate, that I was being difficult, that I didn't understand how hospitals worked. She paused, letting that sink in. 3 months ago, Silvergate Medical Center became the target of a bioterrorism attack that exploited every vulnerability I'd tried to report. 14 people died, hundreds more were put at risk, and it could have been prevented if anyone had listened. The press room was silent, cameras focused, reporters leaned forward. The report we're releasing today documents similar vulnerabilities at facilities across the country, places where equipment is failing, where maintenance is deferred, where safety concerns are ignored because fixing them is expensive or inconvenient or politically problematic. These aren't secrets. These are documented facts that administrators and boards and oversight agencies have chosen not to address. Lena's voice stayed level, professional. We're making them public because secrecy protects the people creating the problems, not the people suffering from them. And because transparency is the only tool that forces change when convenience fails. Captain Hart, a reporter called out, Aren't you concerned this information will enable more attacks? I'm more concerned that hiding this information guarantees more attacks. Sentinel Group didn't need our report to find vulnerabilities. They found them by looking at public records, maintenance logs, and budget reports. Any competent threat actor can do the same. The difference is, now everyone knows. Now patients know. Now staff know. Now voters know. And that knowledge creates pressure to fix what's broken before someone else exploits it. What about the administrators who are named in this report, who face potential legal action? They made choices, chose to defer critical maintenance, chose to ignore safety warnings, chose to protect institutional reputation over patient safety. Lena's eyes were steady. Those choices have consequences, and it's time those consequences landed on the people making the decisions instead of the people trying to stop them. Another reporter. You were fired from Silvergate? Is this revenge? This is accountability. Revenge would be personal. This is systemic. She paused. But yes, I want every person who's been fired for speaking up, who's been labeled difficult for caring too much, who's been punished for doing their job correctly. I want them to know that silence isn't inevitable, that the system can be challenged, that the truth matters even when powerful people wish it didn't. The press conference lasted an hour. Questions came from every angle: supportive, hostile, curious, skeptical. Lena answered each one with the same calm precision, never defensive, never apologetic, just relentlessly factual. Afterward, walking out of the building with Maya beside her, Lena felt lighter than she had in months. That was incredible, Maya said. You just declared war on every negligent administrator in the country. No, I just told the truth about what they've been doing. They declared war on patient safety a long time ago. I'm just making sure everyone can see the battlefield. Her phone started ringing before they reached the car. Reporters, interview requests, threats from people whose comfortable negligence she'd exposed, praise from nurses and doctors who'd been fighting the same battles in silence. She ignored most of it. But one call she answered, Dr. Sarah Brennan from North Ridge. I just watched your press conference, Brennan said. You named systemic failures in federal facilities. You held administrators accountable publicly. You made it impossible for people like me to keep hiding behind limited resources and tough choices. Yes, thank you. Brennan's voice was thick. I've been fighting for funding for 5 years, getting nowhere, watching systems degrade, knowing something bad was coming. And now, because of your report, because of the public pressure, I've got congressional representatives calling me, asking what I need, offering emergency funding. She paused. You changed the conversation, made safety a political priority instead of a line item we could ignore. That's the point. Make ignoring the problem more expensive than fixing it. It's working already, Brennan hesitated. Will you come back to North Ridge, see what you started? Lena thought about Alaska, about the isolated hospital serving people who had nowhere else to go, about vulnerabilities being addressed because hiding them was no longer possible. I'll come, but not yet. I've got 82 other facilities to visit first. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Hospital associations issued statements about operational security and patient confidence. Administrators whose negligence was documented in the report hired lawyers and PR firms. Congressional representatives whose districts included exposed facilities demanded investigations into how the information was released. And Lena faced all of it from her new office at USAMRIID, coordinating the task force that would actually fix what she'd exposed. Maya handled facility assessments. Walsh managed tactical coordination. Khaled analyzed threat patterns. And Lena oversaw it all, making sure that every vulnerability identified got addressed, every safety concern got heard. Every person who'd been punished for speaking up got vindicated. 6 weeks after the press conference, Kane called Lena into her office. You've created quite a storm, the colonel said. I've created accountability. Same thing in Washington. Kane pulled out a folder. The Secretary of Homeland Security wants to meet you. So does the CDC director, and approximately 40 senators who are suddenly very interested in infrastructure security funding. Good. They should be. They want you to testify. Congressional hearings about healthcare infrastructure vulnerabilities. Public testimony about what happened at Silvergate, about Sentinel Group, about systematic failures and oversight. Kane's expression was unreadable. You'll be under oath, under scrutiny. Every decision you made, every action you took, examined by people looking for mistakes. Let them look. I documented everything, did everything by the book. If they want to second guess saving lives, that's their problem. They might try to make it your problem. They can try. Lena's voice was flat. I've already been fired for being right, already been humiliated for doing my job well, already been punished for caring when convenient people wished I wouldn't. What else can they take that I haven't already lost and rebuilt better? Kane smiled, genuine, proud. That's exactly the attitude that's going to change everything. Because you're right, you've already survived the worst. Everything else is just noise. The congressional testimony happened 3 months later. Lena sat at a table facing a panel of senators, cameras broadcasting nationally, and told the story she'd been trying to tell for 2 years. About Silvergate, about being fired, about Sentinel Group, about systematic failures that cost lives, about changing the system from someone who'd been broken by it and refused to stay broken. Some senators were hostile, questioned her decisions, suggested she'd endangered operational security by going public, implied that her vendetta against Silvergate had motivated everything. Lena answered each attack calmly, factually, with the precision of someone who knew her documentation was flawless. Senator, with respect, I didn't create the vulnerabilities at Silvergate. I reported them. The administration chose to ignore those reports and fire me instead of addressing the problems. That choice, their choice, made the facility vulnerable to attack. I simply documented what they chose to hide. But by going public, I made it impossible to keep hiding. Yes, because hiding those problems was protecting the people who created them at the expense of the people suffering from them. And I decided that protecting patients was more important than protecting reputations. Other senators were supportive, asked about the task force, about progress securing vulnerable facilities, about what Congress could do to prevent future attacks. Fund it, Lena said simply. Stop treating infrastructure maintenance as optional. Stop allowing administrators to defer critical repairs. Stop punishing people who report safety concerns. Make safety a requirement instead of a suggestion, and enforce that requirement with audits and consequences. That would cost billions. Yes, considerably less than responding to a successful large-scale attack would cost, both in dollars and in lives. Lena met the senator's eyes. You can pay now to fix the problems, or pay later to manage the casualties, but you're going to pay either way. The only question is which bill you prefer. The testimony lasted 2 days. When it was over, Lena walked out of the Capitol building and found Maya waiting on the steps. How'd it go? Maya asked. Hard to tell. Half of them want to give me a medal. Half want to investigate me for insubordination. Lena shrugged. Doesn't matter. The information's public now. The conversation's happening. Whether they want to or not, they're going to have to address it. So what's next? Next, we visit facility number 37 on the list. See what needs fixing. Make sure it gets fixed. Lena started down the steps. And we keep doing that until all 83 are secure. Then we start on the next 100. That's going to take years. Good. I've got years. And now I've got resources, authority, and a platform. Lena smiled slightly. Turns out being fired publicly and then proving everyone wrong spectacularly has its advantages. They walked through Washington together, past government buildings and monuments, through a city that was finally paying attention to problems it had ignored for decades. Because one nurse had refused to stay quiet, had refused to accept that being fired meant being silenced, had turned professional destruction into professional purpose. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, then something made her answer. Captain Hart, the handler's voice again. I watched your testimony. Very compelling. You've made quite a name for yourself. Good. Next time you're planning an attack, you'll know I'm watching. Oh, we know. Everyone knows now. That's the problem. You've become too visible, too protected, too useful to eliminate without creating a martyr. He paused. You won, Captain. This round, you actually won. Then why are you calling? To tell you something you already know, that this doesn't end. That for every vulnerability you fix, someone will find another. That for every system you secure, someone will test a different one. That the fight you've chosen is permanent. I know. And you're doing it anyway. Yes. Why? Lena thought about Silvergate, about standing alone in a conference room while people decided she was the problem, about patients dying because convenient people made convenient choices, about all the other nurses and doctors and medical staff who'd tried to speak up and been silenced. Because someone has to. Because the system won't fix itself. Because people who've been punished for doing the right thing need to know it's possible to survive and fight back. She paused. And because I'm really good at it. The handler laughed. Actual humor. Almost respect. Yes, you are. That's why we won't try again. Not against you. Not against facilities you've secured. The cost-benefit doesn't work anymore. But you'll try somewhere else. Eventually, when we find the next gap, the next weakness, the next convenient administrator who values reputation over safety. He paused. And I suspect you'll be there, making it inconvenient, making it expensive, making it impossible to hide. Count on it. I am. The line went dead. Lena stood on the street holding her phone, feeling something settle that had been unsettled since Silvergate. Not satisfaction exactly. Not victory. Just purpose. Clear and defined and permanent. Maya was watching her. The handler? Saying goodbye, saying we won. Did we? This time, this fight. Lena pocketed her phone. There'll be others, but now we're ready for them. They walked back toward their car, through a city that was slowly, grudgingly, beginning to change. Because transparency had forced conversations that convenience had buried. Because consequences had landed on the people making bad decisions instead of the people suffering from them. Because one person who'd been fired for being right had refused to let that be the end of the story. 3 months later, Lena stood in Northridge Medical Center, watching as new equipment was installed, as systems were upgraded, as the vulnerabilities that had made it a target were systematically eliminated. Dr. Brennan gave her a tour, showing her every improvement, every fix, every change that had come from exposure instead of secrecy. The community knows now, Brennan said, about how close we came, about what could have happened, and they're watching, making sure we maintain these standards, making sure we don't slip back. That's how it should work, Lena said. Transparency creating accountability, accountability creating safety. It wouldn't have happened without you, without what you sacrificed to make this public. I didn't sacrifice anything. They tried to take my career. I just built a better one. Lena looked around the hospital, at staff who were safer, at systems that were secure, at a facility that would never again be an easy target. This is what I was trying to do at Silvergate, fix the problems, protect the patients, do the job right. And now you're doing it everywhere. Now I'm doing it everywhere, Lena agreed. Because it turns out being fired publicly and proving them wrong spectacularly opens a lot of doors. Her phone buzzed. Message from Maya. Facility 83 completed. All vulnerabilities addressed. We're done with the original list. Good, Lena typed back. Start on the secondary list, 114 facilities that match the risk profile. You're relentless. I'm thorough. There's a difference. She pocketed her phone, said goodbye to Brennan, and walked out of Northridge Medical Center into Alaskan wilderness that stretched forever. Breathed air that tasted like ice and possibility. Thought about the path that had led here, from invisible nurse to fired scapegoat to federal captain to the person who changed how an entire country thought about infrastructure security. It had cost her. The firing, the humiliation, the public scrutiny, the permanent visibility that meant she'd never be anonymous again. But it had also given her something that comfort never could. Purpose that mattered, work that saved lives, and the absolute certainty that speaking up, even when it costs everything, is always the right choice. Because systems don't change on their own. They change when people who've been broken by them refuse to stay broken. When the nurse who got fired becomes the captain who rebuilds. When the person they tried to silence becomes the voice impossible to ignore. And as Lieutenant Hart stood in Alaska, coordinating the protection of critical infrastructure across an entire nation, she understood that Silvergate Medical Center had made one critical mistake. They'd thought firing her would make the problem disappear. Instead, they'd created someone who would spend the rest of her career making sure that what happened to her, and what almost happened to thousands of patients, would never happen again. The quiet nurse they'd dismissed had become the soldier they couldn't stop, and she was just getting started.